Okay, welcome everybody. I hope you can see all the slides online. So welcome to today's session, which is an interesting but very important session on trying to bring together all people who have various interests, networks and programs across the space and astronomy area. And just to show you the program, in this first session, we're going to look on the strategic landscape. There are several strategies floating around at the moment. The Astronet, who will give their presentation in a moment. I suspect that most of you have seen the Astronet roadmap. We will then have a presentation very kindly from Csilla from ESA on the human and robotic space program. And then we have a recording from ESFRI. Kristiaan, they can't be here. There's a European meeting at the moment this week, the Swedish presidency, and ESFRI attended that on Monday and Tuesday, and they've got their meeting up there, so we have a recording. Then, just to put everybody to get a picture of what everybody else is doing, we have a series of short presentations from each of the kind of research infrastructures and other space-related networks, as you can see here, so that we can all just kind of see what each of us are doing and who we are. And I think what will come out from that, we will see many areas of commonality where perhaps it's opportunities for us to work together and coordinate some of the activities we do. We have chosen one topic which we felt as part of the ERIM program that would be of interest to everybody in the research infrastructures, because it is a common theme across pretty much every call and all activities. And that is, how do we widen our community? The space sector is perhaps not always representative of the wider community. So as part of the ERIM, as part of the Europlanet meeting, we are trying this week to sort of think about ways forward. So we will have a diversity roundtable in this room, and we hope that it'll be very interesting to get the input from all the space networks and so on about this idea of trying to widen our participation. So that's what we will do before lunch. And then after lunch, the session is about what are the common challenges that we have? How might we cooperate? One of them, of course, for those of us who are all relying on and have worked with the European Commission, is the European Commission landscape for research infrastructure funding. We all know some of the challenges there, but we can talk a little bit about that and how we also feed some of those commonalities back to the Commission. And then what I hope that we'll do is having got you all together, is that we can leave this meeting today with an idea of how we might actually collaborate and coordinate our activities. And one suggestion is that we kind of set up, like other areas have done, particularly the analytical, a kind of network of networks, a structure where we just say, right, we are all the people in this area, we'll invite everybody here to collaborate in some way with an informal network. And that's the option of a network of networks. Then we will have an opportunity for further discussions after the coffee break. However, if you are going to the observatory, then please meet in the lobby to get on the bus at about 3:45. The bus will leave at about 4 for the observatory. So if you're going to the observatory, then please make sure you're down in the lobby at about 3:45. If you're not on the observatory, we have the opportunity for informal discussions. And as I say, we're very grateful that you all came. And I think this probably is the first time that we've all got together in a room. And so perhaps we all need to talk to each other and find out who we are and have a little bit of discussion of who we are. So we've left time for that because we don't want to pack it out. And then to continue that, we have invited you all out for dinner this evening. Sophia will give us the instructions of where we're going for dinner later. It's just a nice restaurant down the hill here somewhere. So we have that opportunity. And that was what the idea of today was, to kind of bring you together so we all get to know each other. And some of us who were involved in a proposal, the space side proposal, a lot of good things came out of that. But I think for me, one of the things came out was we're all doing the same, we're doing very similar things, but we're all doing them slightly differently, and we can all learn from each other. And it was a great experience. It was hard work, but it was a great experience of finding out what we do. And then from that, there were other parts where we thought, okay, there are other groups that perhaps, you know, we should talk to and so on. So if I've missed anybody, if we've missed groupings, then of course, please tell us. I mean, we've got the Jive people here, great. But if there are other networks that we think we've missed, then please let us know, because obviously we'd like to invite them, and just be our ignorance that we don't know other networks that we think might be appropriate. Okay, so that's the networking for the day. So the first session, we're going to start with 3 strategy talks to give us a bit of a landscape of the people who are kind of trying to set out what we're trying to do. And the first, we have Astronet, we have ESA, and we have ESFRI. So we're going to start with Astronet, who are online. And I'm going to look at my AV people there to tell us how we're now going to get them online. And we have Colin and Anna, I hope, be able to join us online and give the presentation.
Good morning.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning. Brilliant. Perfect. Nice to see you, albeit virtually.
So thank you very much. We're going to give a short presentation on what Astronet is and what it's been doing recently, particularly with respect to the recently published Science Vision and Infrastructure Roadmap. Amelie kindly was the lead editor for this exercise from UCL in London, with a team of editors helping her to complete and publish the report. So just a very quick background on what is Astronet. Hopefully most of you know, but it's a consortium of European funding agencies, national societies, and infrastructures, and other relevant bodies who can represent national communities. And much like other bodies like this, including the Astroparticle Physics one and Europlanet, we aim to provide a forum to coordinate scientific direction and new capabilities. One of the key parts of the the premise for constructing Astronet was that we were trying to include funding agencies, and therefore those who had influence on national policies, and indeed influence with some of the international organizations. That has proved a mixed success, I would say. We originally supported by the Commission, but at the Commission's behest, we went independent a few years back. And we've currently got around 20 members, which are a mixture of full members and observers. The last few years, we've been focused very much on the Science Vision and Infrastructure Roadmap. And we're moving into a phase now where we are looking to act on the recommendations that are included within that report. We have strong links to the European Astronomical Society, to the Astroparticle Physics Organization, to Europlanet, and to some EC programs. We'll come on to that later. And just to say that we have no paid for effort. So any effort and anything we do is through in-kind contributions through our members and observers. So we're very much dependent on the community with some support from the agencies to enable anything that we do. And that does somewhat limit the effectiveness of what we can do and how quickly we can do it. I'll now pass over to Amelie to give you an introduction to the Science Vision and Roadmap.
Excellent. Yes, so as Colin said, this roadmap has been several years in the making. It's an update on a previous edition that was put together about 10 years ago. And so I will go into some of the details of how the roadmap was structured, how it was put together, how we came up with recommendations, and I will give you an overview of some of the key recommendations. But all of that rather light touch and trying to put emphasis on the things that might be useful for discussions later in the day, rather than discuss specific facilities and so on. So it's good to point out that in some sense, you know, this roadmap is similar to other major review of facility prioritization that are done worldwide. But it's a little different in its flavor compared to, for example, the big one that's being done in the US, in the sense that this started with the Astronet board creating a series of panels tasked with the report, the task of consulting their communities and coming up with a report that would summarize the state of the field and what are the aspirations for the next decade. 5 of these panels are science area specific, including one about formation and evolution of planetary system. And two of those panels are more cross-cutting, one on computing and data infrastructures, and the other one on what we call astronomy and society, which I will touch upon later, but that touches all these questions of inclusion, diversity, sustainability, outreach, education, and all these things. So the process, the little scheme on the left has many arrows going in all sorts of direction, which is a bit confusing, but it's meant to highlight in some sense how interconnected this was. This was both, there was a lot of community consultation. The report really is aimed at funding agencies and to show them what are the priorities of the community across the European community. Therefore, it was important that it had maximum buy-in and maximum support from the community, hence why we did a lot of back and forth to make sure our recommendation really represented the wishes of the community. Okay, excellent. So this is an overview of what the roadmap is about. I think as I talk through the main recommendation, you'll see that a lot of those are aimed at the big facilities. But just to point out that we make a strong point in the full report itself to highlight that, the astronomy research is really a very large ecosystem, and we can't focus just on the large facilities alone. We need the smaller scale facilities that are more, rapid, more flexible, to support and follow up on the big observations of the large facilities. At the same time, we need to focus on funding the computing, data infrastructures, and all these interconnected aspects. So that's kind of it might not come across when I describe the recommendation, but it's really part of the philosophy, shall we say, of the report, to really highlight the need not just to focus on big flagship facilities, but on all aspects of the astronomy infrastructure. And I guess what I'll do, I'll just give you a summary of the main recommendations. So in our exercise, it's important to say that we scan all possible astronomy infrastructures, and we considered for prioritization those that still required major funding decisions and those that would see first light by 2035 or so. Those were sort of the parameters of the exercise. And out of all the facilities that we scanned, the top three in terms of new ground-based facilities that came up were the Cherenkov telescope array, which will be enable the study of gamma rays for the first time at sort of observatory scale. So this will be really game-changing for the field. The European Solar Telescope, which was already a priority 10 years ago, but is now still a top priority, especially given that the US-based DKIS telescope has now been completed. So it's important that the AST is complete as soon as possible to maintain the leadership of the European community in the area of solar physics. We also point out that all of this cannot come at the cost of facilities that are currently being put together, the ELT in its first generation instrument and the SKA in its first phase, and in particularly not forgetting about the very important SKA regional centers, which are central to the exploitation of the facility. Okay, a second category are facilities that we have that need, that we can extract more science from them if we follow up with, aggressive and ambitious new instrumentation programs. There was across the different science area, there was a wide wish to see ALMA improved and augmented in all sorts of ways, especially with longer baselines, wider bandwidths, and as well as improving the connectivity and the VLBI capabilities. New instruments on the VLT, because even though we will get the ELT, it won't do everything, and the VLT will remain, a prime instrument even in the ELT era. And regarding the ELT, I think we identified that we stressed that, we shouldn't forget about the need to fund technology development studies. Some of the technology required for these next generation instruments take decades to mature, so it's important to get going now with planning for second and third generation instruments for the ELT. In terms of space-based facilities, well, so as you may know, this, we can come up with recommendation, but it's faced with the reality that a lot of the space missions within Europe are under the remit of ESA, who conducted their own prioritization exercise recently. So this is just to point out that we conducted a completely independent exercise just to see where the priorities of the community are. And there's a lot of alignment, but we point out a few other areas that for consideration, especially in the longer term future. For this first step, I think there was a strong cry from the community that we want both Athena and LISA, so an X-ray and a gravitational wave missions, respectively, and the community wants them, if at all possible, as close as possible to the original specifications. Both facilities are facing significant budget limitations and therefore possible descopes. So we really have emphasized that wish that they preserve their initially planned capabilities. Possibly of interest for this room, our other strong priority in terms of space was everything regarding Mars exploration, which came up again as a very strong priority. And in particular, the need to prioritize finding solution and for the ExoMars mission that was, as most everybody knows, I'm sure, was so strongly impacted by the Ukraine situation. It's been rescued with the plans for a European lander, but that really needs to be prioritized so it can be achieved on a short enough timescale. And I think we highlighted in there as well the need for just a really good coordination across the European community for future planetary exploration missions. Something new that we really tried to put a lot of emphasis on in this Astronet roadmap is laboratory astrophysics. I think there's several areas. Astrochemistry is becoming quite crucial to many different areas of astrophysics, for example, and this needs to be done hand in hand between astronomical observations and ground-based laboratory experiments. So this is an area where there's definitely a lot of scope for cross-institution, national, cross-research network coordination, because these are the kind of facilities that are funded in a slightly piecemeal ways. So to have a very strong voice that we need these facilities funded, both in terms of interpreting samples, but as well computing line lists for numerical calculations of exoplanet atmospheres and so on. As I said, I won't go through all the details of this. It's all in the report, but I think, a place where there needs to be a lot of forward thinking is in the technology development. The facilities of the future, the ones that we will need post 2035 to make the next big breakthroughs, will require technologies that are absolutely not ready at the moment. So it's important to remind funding agencies that they need to fund basic R&D if we will remain competitive in the future. And here I've put together on this slide recommendations from 3 other categories, and not to because they're less important. If any sense, they are very important. While conducting this exercise, I think I was personally quite surprised by how often people came back to us pointing out the desire for the astronomy research in Europe to be far more sustainable, accessible, and where we play a role as citizens as well as scientists. I think that there's a very strong shift in this direction that we all need to realize. It's the desire, a strong desire of the community itself. So we need to make sure that comes across to funding agencies, because they are the ones that have a lot of the power to implement changes. So we came up with many recommendations, which again, we can go in detail later, but things around ensuring, recognizing that the workforce we need to conduct research is broad, and we need to make sure there are interesting career paths and security for all these career trajectories. And we need to engage with teaching. We need to include cutting edge research in the national curriculum with an emphasis on, big science, big data, which are the major themes of today's research, and so on. Okay, this is just a summary again. I won't go through that again, but just to point out if people are interested, so this quick overview of the report, and we make recommendations as well for, the post-2035 timescale, including a list of sort of aspirations for what we need to do at European level in terms of coordination to make sure we get these facilities. So this is an area possibly of interest for discussion for this group. And then I think the next step is what's next for Astronet following these recommendations. So I'll hand over to Colin for that.
Thank you very much, Amelie. So yes, the sort of following thing is what's next. Having got this report, what do we do with it? As I said in my introduction, the Astronet board is starting to consider the recommendations, and we're in a phase at the moment to promote the awareness of the report itself to the media, to the community, and to the policymakers that it was aimed towards. The responsibility there is very much with our partners, our members and observers, to take this back to their own communities and to put it out as much as they can in every and any media opportunity that they know of. People know their own communities better than Astronet itself, so the emphasis there is for them to take the lead. We already have links, as I said, to APPEC, to Europlanet, and to some of the European Commission funded exercises, and some of that will come up later today. But I think those things are clearly routes by which this can have a greater impact across the European landscape for astronomy. And so we're very keen to maintain links with those initiatives, and indeed to help develop new ones. We're working on improving our links with ESFRI, along with APPEC and Europlanet. We've submitted an input to the ESFRI landscape analysis as a start to that, but have also contacted our leads in the Commission to say, look, we've now got this report, how do we work better with you in the future? And again, this will come up later today, I think, in more detail. And as some people in the audience know, we've helped with the formation of ACME, one of the EC bids at the moment, and there are other bids which are currently under discussion, and we expect to take a role in supporting those as well, where we as Astronet as a coordinating organisation. Not all the recommendations are really directly for Astronet. Some of them to take forward. Some of them I think are more ones that where their partners and the community need to go to their own national bodies, to their own national policymakers or influencers, and take the lead on the recommendations there. And others are ones where we will work with partners such as the European Space Agency, ESA, SK, etc., to try and ensure that some of the ideas that we have put forward are embedded in the ways in which they take their own projects, infrastructures forward in the next few years. So there's a whole range of things that need to be enacted upon. In terms of the big infrastructures, obviously, in some cases, ESO, for ELT, SK, etc., Rubin, and a lot of the ESA program. These are things that are already in train, and therefore our voice is one which is supporting the decisions made and just emphasizing the importance of those to the science and to the community. But for others that are coming up, I think we can have an influential role by engaging with the bodies that are the ones that actually make the decisions. And here, as I mentioned just a minute ago, the European Space Agency is very keen, but also to talk to NASA and bodies in the US, because as we've seen in the past, a lot of the ideas that come out of things like the NASA program, the US Decadal Survey before that, and the European Voyage 2050 and Terra Novi reports end up being more than just European or just US enterprises. And so there's a global aspect of what we need to do there. Obviously, we'll continue to work with our colleagues in astroparticle physics and in Europlanet and the other planetary fora to take forward those things. So we see ourselves very much as contributing to the taking forward the various ideas that have come out of the report and hoping to make it relevant for the community and for the development and the success of astronomy in the next 20, 30 years. And I think that's all I have to say. So thank you very much.
Thank you much, Amelie and Colin. I think that's a really useful overview. We did have yesterday here a whole session on policy and how to talk to policymakers at various levels, which was really interesting. And I think certainly, when we go into these meetings of the Commission and Parliament and national agencies, one of the things today, the theme is how do we get a common message? So they don't see lots of different things, because actually much of the time we're trying to do the same. But if you haven't read the Astronet roadmap, I mean, it is online, you can download it and so on. I would recommend everybody reads it. It's got lots of information in it, and road mapping ahead for the next 10 years. So I think it's done an excellent job, and already it's being drawn down in some of the projects to sort of focus some of the science work as well. So thank you very much, Colin and Amelie. I hope you will be around for the rest of the day. I mean, the next session is very much focused on diversity, which you've raised is a key issue across all communities. That's why we've kind of chosen it as a general discussion in the next session. Csilla, I'm going to ask now, we've heard about ESA, so if you would be next up.
Okay, good. Good morning, everyone. My name is Csilla Orgel, and I'm a planetary scientist working at ESA HRSE in the SciSpace team. And today I'm going to talk about the Terra Novae exploration program and also the SciSpace strategy, which is the science program for the Terra Novae. Okay, so the Terra Novae is based on common goals. So we have continuity, which is the sustainable presence and use of the low Earth orbit. We have ambition that we want to go to the moon by 2030. We have also inspiration that we want to have our own cargo and crew transportation system. And also we have a vision that Europeans will eventually go to Mars, maybe by early 2040. So the Terra Novae program encompasses 3 destinations: the low Earth orbit, the moon, the vicinity of the moon and the moon's lunar surface, and also Mars. And there are several elements here, which I'm going to talk about later. So the program is structured around 4 cornerstones. As I mentioned, cornerstone 1 is humans in LEO. Cornerstone 2 is humans beyond LEO, so basically the activities on the gateway around the moon. Cornerstone 3 is moon robotic exploration. Cornerstone 4 is Mars exploration mission. And these cornerstones are supported by teams like the expert team, which is conducting future mission studies, and also technology studies up to a mid-technology readiness level. And also the SciSpace team, which is providing the science for the Terra Novae, and also, of course, commercialization. So the SciSpace team, where I'm also based at, it is composed of 3 different disciplines: physical sciences, life sciences, and moon and Mars sciences. Physical sciences is more like physics in space and fundamental physics, material science. Life sciences is all about biology, space biology, and health in space. And moon Mars sciences is everything which we know as planetary science, but the exploration program is focusing on moon and Mars. And the SciSpace team has created the strategy in which we have 6 different spotlights. And these spotlights are based on community discussions and also the SciSpace white papers, and also incorporates documents like the science at the moon and resources at the moon from 2019. You might be aware of these documents. So, and also these spotlights are merging all the sciences I mentioned before, physical sciences, life sciences, and planetary sciences. So the result of these 6 spotlights are the result of merging all these disciplines together. I don't want to go through necessarily one by one. However, this science-based strategy is still not published, which is probably, hopefully, will be in this year. And we have a new website. You can see the link at the end of my slide. But of course, if you are interested at each of these spotlights have several questions. We can go through all of these at the end of the presentation. But now I want to talk about the platforms and the several projects we are working on. So SciSpace has space analogs and ground-based facilities. So we have bed rest studies, dry immersion study, sounding rocket, drop tower. We have experiments on Concordia on Antarctica. We conduct experiments on parabolic flights and other ground-based facilities where we simulate more gravity so higher gravity conditions and also radiation. So the question would be how these kind of facilities could be helpful for this community here. So do you want to use any of these ground-based facilities for your own experiments? It might be very interesting to think about. So the cislunar space. So ESA is currently working with NASA on several projects regarding the Orion spacecraft and the Lunar Gateway. So ESA is providing the European service module for Orion, and it was already contracted that we are providing 6 of these modules. So for Artemis, from Artemis 1 to Artemis 6. And also ESA is providing the IHAB, the International Habitation Model for the Gateway. And this will be delivered by Artemis 4 mission around 2027. And also ESA is providing the ESFRI module, which is composed of 3 different elements. It's providing refueling, infrastructure, and also telecommunications. And that will fly on Artemis 5. And what might be interesting for you, there are 2 payload packages planned for the Gateway. It's called ERSA and IDA. And they are providing information on health and environment monitoring. So they measure the dust and plasma and radiation environment on the station and also outside the space station. But what is the actual vision for ESA regarding the lunar surface? So we would like to send our first European astronaut to the moon by 2030, and we would like to also have regular access during the 2030s to the lunar surface. And also what we would like to do is we want to grow science, and we would like to put technology, payload, and foster commercial utilization. And we would like to establish an international base camp for research with all of our partners, JAXA, NASA, and Canada and other agencies. And also eventually we would like to prepare for a human mission to Mars. So, but not running so fast to Mars. So we have already some early science and payload planned to send to the lunar surface. So we have altogether 6 science and technology payloads, which we would like to send by 2026. That includes several of these payloads. Like the first one will fly on a peregrine lander. Peregrine ion trap mass spectrometer. That will be our first science on the moon, and it will be launched this year. Prospect is a lunar ice drill and analyzer. So it's gonna look for water ice at the south pole of the moon. And I'm proud of that project because when I was a research fellow at ESA, I also worked on that. The third one is the moonlight retroreflector. So the moonlight is gonna become a navigation and communication system around the moon. We have a Landcam X, it's a navigation camera demonstrator. We have also a payload which is called the negative ion at the lunar surface, NILS. It's gonna fly on Chang'e 6, so we are also cooperating with China on that. And Chang'e 6 is a sample return mission, so it will be very exciting. And EMS LUPEX, it's a mass spectrometer, and it will fly with the Japanese lunar rover. So these are the scheduled payloads for the moon. Okay, but we also work on something else. So it's called the European Large Logistics Lander, which got also renamed as Argonaut, and it's capable to bring 1.5 tons of payload to the lunar surface. And this will be supporting the Artemis human missions and also supporting sample return missions. It delivers not only cargo and infrastructure, but also science and technology. So probably in the first few flights, we might not have a space for our own European technology and science to do on the moon, but eventually we would like to also launch our own mission with Argonaut, which will be purely an ESA mission, hopefully in the mid-2030s. And as you can see, I put some major themes around the corner. So which kind of science we think we can do. We would like to observe the environment. We are interested in geology and geophysics, geophysical network system. We would like to get samples returned by the crew, and also we are looking for resources, water, ice, regulate several metals on the moon. Okay, now I would like to move on to the Mars program. So currently ExoMars, the Rosalind Franklin rover, and also Mars Sample Return, these are the two major elements of the Mars exploration program. And these are eating most of the budget. So as you know, ExoMars was delayed several times. And now the baseline for the launch is 2028. We Europeans, we build the lander, but we also trying to cooperate with NASA to have a successful launch by 2028. And the Mars Sample Return, so in this campaign, we have a joint endeavor with NASA, and we are providing a sample transfer arm, which is gonna take the sample tubes collected by the Perseverance rover. This will be collected by the arm and placed in a sample container, which will be ascending to Mars orbit and will be caught by the Earth Return Orbiter, also from ESA. So this is purely ESA orbiter. Unfortunately, at the moment, there's no science planned on that. But what comes after these two large programs, and of course, sample return mission will be by 2033. But if we want to keep doing exploration of Mars, we have to plan everything ahead. So we have to plan the activities after MSR and ExoMars. We have to plan those right now. So we conducted a few studies, mission concept studies at ESA regarding communication navigation system. We studied weather network. We studied ice access mission coupling with ISRU instruments, and also probably in the very, very distant future, maybe we could send another rover to Mars. But I have to say, all these 4 studies we conducted, these are not chosen. So these are just purely studies, ideas, and we might not send any of these, or just a descope version of all these missions. So, but we need to really plan all that now to send something in the mid-2030s. And I put some references at the end. So the European Space Agency Strategy for Science at the Moon and Space Resources Strategy, they were published in 2019, and they are heavily used in the SciSpace strategy. There are SciSpace white papers available online, and these are also incorporated in the SciSpace strategy. And also the Terra Nova roadmap is publicly available. And as I mentioned before, the SciSpace strategy is still a draft. We are still working on the Mars exploration part of it. So please stay tuned, and you will get more information by the end of the year. And thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Well, we won't take questions now because we have the whole session this afternoon, and we'll start the session this afternoon by asking people to ask questions to the people who gave all the talks this morning. So that might be the best way of doing it, and then you've got time to do that. Right, the third strategy, so thank you ever so much for that, really useful, and the space size strategy, the size strategy is really good, and we're looking forward to seeing that published. Right, so we have one more presentation, which is from ESFRI. Unfortunately, as I said, they can't be here, but Kristiaan has done the recording, and hopefully we'll be able to get it to play.
Morning, everybody. I'm very happy that I can contribute to your meeting, and therefore I would like to thank in particular Professor Nigel Mason for giving me that opportunity. What I would like to do is to contribute a little bit to your meeting with the view from ESFRI, which is the European Strategy Forum on Research Infrastructures. I regret that I cannot be in person with you at your meeting, but it just happens to coincide with the ESFRI Forum in Sweden, and so most of the people involved with ESFRI will be attending the meeting in Lund. My name is Kristiaan Temst. I'm a professor at the Quantum Solid State Physics division at the University of Leuven in Belgium, and I'm also a part-time employee of APPEC, the microelectronics laboratory, which is also located in Leuven. And currently I am the chair of the ESFRI Strategy Working Group on Physical Sciences and Engineering. So what I will do is to come to some ideas, some reflections on the way that you as a scientific community could perhaps organize yourself to create as much impact as possible in your research area, but also for ESFRI. I will come to that in the second part of my presentation, but perhaps not everybody among you is familiar with ESFRI, and therefore I take the liberty to spend a little bit of time on saying what is ESFRI and what does it do. ESFRI is in fact an informal body which has been created just over 20 years ago, and it is composed by representatives of the member states, the associated countries, and the EEC, and it is really focusing on issues related to research infrastructures. And the main goal of ESFRI is to provide advice to the Council. So in that I have to be very clear, ESFRI is in itself not a funding agency. It will provide advice about, for instance, new research infrastructures, about the evaluation of ongoing research infrastructures and landmarks. It will provide advice about the necessity for new research infrastructures and such, but it will not provide any funding in itself. On the other hand, we observe that the advice that is given by ESFRI is very often taken up by the funding agencies who will then provide national or international funding. So in that respect, ESFRI is also providing a platform where national opportunities can exchange information, can exchange opportunities that have to do with initiatives either on the national or the international scale for new or existing research infrastructures. So it wants to be an incubator for new research infrastructures and also a European knowledge hub on research infrastructures, how they can work together. And it's also a little bit within that context that I provide my contribution today. As I said, ESFRI was established in 2002 with a mandate from the EU Council, and that mandate consists of a number of points. First of all, ESFRI is expected to support a coherent and a strategy-led approach to policy making on research infrastructures in Europe. So a lot of the documents that ESFRI produces, like mostly in particular the landscape analysis and the roadmap for research infrastructures, they are targeted to the policymakers and to the funding agencies. ESFRI also wants to facilitate initiatives that lead to a more optimal use and further development of research infrastructures. And as I hinted before, its two core activities are the establishment of a European roadmap for research infrastructures, which is describing new facilities, major upgrades, their pan-European interest, also their socio-economic impact, and so on. And alongside with the creation of the roadmap for research infrastructures, there is the exercise that is called the landscape analysis. Also, the landscape analysis, just like the roadmap, is done every, let's say, 2 or 3 years or so. And the idea is to provide a comprehensive analysis of the existing infrastructures, what new developments there are, but also where there are perhaps gaps in which new research infrastructures could be made or could be made extended. But it also looks for transversal interconnections between different research infrastructures, all with the aim of getting as much benefit out of the research infrastructures as possible. ESFRI therefore also is responsible for the follow-up of implementation of already ongoing ESFRI projects, and that is currently also being done with an exercise that is called the monitoring of the ESFRI landmarks. ESFRI covers a very wide range of different topics, and these are organized or clustered, if you want, within particular strategy working groups. So here you see on the right-hand side, you see the list of all the different strategy working groups: social and cultural innovation, environment, data, health and food, energy, and the physical sciences and engineering. And then apart from that, there is a work group that exclusively deals with the implementation of research infrastructures and their governance. And as I said, I'm the chair of the physical sciences and engineering, and this is a strategy working group that covers a really very broad area. Let me come back for a moment to these two major instruments, which are the roadmap and the landscape analysis. And let me first say a few words about the roadmap. Looking back on it, you could say that there have been 2 generations of this roadmap. There was a first one that was published in 2006 with updates in 2008 and 2010. And these roadmaps were essentially a sort of catalogue of the different research infrastructures that were available at that moment, and also describing to what scientific fields they reach out. But then in a second generation, a second cycle of roadmaps, it was decided to go beyond that and not to restrict the roadmap only to a description of the research infrastructures, but also go more towards the strategic value of these research infrastructures, and also defining more clearly what are the minimal key requirements for a research infrastructure, to also devise a concept for the life cycle of a research infrastructure, and so on. Together with those more detailed definition and this more strategic approach, was also the development of a comprehensive evaluation methodology for the research infrastructures. In the meantime, 3 roadmaps have been published within that second generation in 2016, 18, and 21. And the next edition of the roadmap is foreseen for 2025. Along with that roadmap was always the publication of the so-called landscape analysis. The landscape analysis is a very detailed analysis of a particular research field. Take, for instance, the physical sciences and engineering, and a description of how the existing research infrastructures fit within that landscape and how they cater for the different scientific communities that are encompassed with that landscape analysis. This has resulted in the fact that on the most recent version of the roadmap, there are 41 ESFRI landmarks. So these are projects that are already in an advanced state of development, as well as 22 projects which are in a much earlier stage of their lifetime. What we are currently doing is the monitoring of the ESFRI landmarks. So during a period of 3 years, we will visit all of the existing landmarks. And currently, we're also working on an update of the landscape analysis. And for the first time, there will be some novelties in the sense that the landscape analysis is now decoupled from the roadmap. And the idea being that later this year or beginning of next year, we publish the next landscape analysis so that then in 2025, the new roadmap can build on that existing landscape analysis. What are a number of important issues for the roadmap and the landscape analysis? Well, the research infrastructures in an increasing way, they have to demonstrate their pan-European relevance. They also have to demonstrate their socio-economic impact. And what we see happening, and I think that that will also be the topic of discussion at your meeting, is that whereas a lot of the research infrastructures used to be individual units, now we see a tendency for them to organize themselves in larger clusters or under a certain common umbrella, because that way it becomes easier to demonstrate exactly that pan-European relevance and the socio-economic impact. In that respect, I think it's also important for each and every individual research infrastructure that since last year, it is possible to declare yourself a stakeholder at ESFRI. And that means that you will also be kept informed about the ongoing ESFRI activities, but that you also will be invited to let your voice be heard at ESFRI. So for instance, as we have had a couple of months ago, that all the stakeholders had the opportunity to contribute themselves to the landscape analysis and to deliver input on what they see as gaps or challenges within that landscape. And so that is reflected in that ongoing landscape analysis. There is a broader consultation of the stakeholders. So once again, here's my message: make your voice heard, sign up on the stakeholders forum. And ESFRI is open to broaden its scope for the landscape analysis. I think it was remarked in the past, and I think it was a rightful remark, that sometimes particular scientific communities remained invisible or underrepresented in the landscape analysis, and we try to fix that issue. The input that we received a couple of months ago is currently being implemented in the new landscape analysis, which is to be published end of 23 or beginning of 24. And as I said before, the target audience of this landscape analysis are the policymakers. And therefore, I have to stress once more how important it is that you can leave your mark or put your fingerprint on that landscape analysis, because that's the way that it can be picked up by the policymakers and the funding agencies. Just for your information, these are the projects, so the research infrastructures, as well as the landmarks that are currently on the ESFRI roadmap within the field of physical sciences and engineering. But I will not dwell on that right now. And rather, I would like to say a few more words about this landscape analysis. In the landscape analysis that we finalized in 2021, we have basically covered 3 areas. The first one being astronomy and astroparticle physics, and you can find the full text of the landscape analysis pertaining to this part in on the website of ESFRI. But this figure here nicely demonstrates how we try to tackle that landscape analysis. So we try to bring some order in the different research infrastructures to make clear which ones are belonging to a particular topic, how they interact with each other, what are the transversal correlations between them, and so on. So this is the picture for astronomy and astroparticle physics. The next one here is for particle and nuclear physics. I will not go into the details. I'm sure that you will also receive these slides afterwards. And I show you also the example for the analytical physics, where we've done the same approach, where you see particular research infrastructures that use a particular probe, like synchrotron light or neutrons or ions or whatever. What you see here is that also each group or cluster of research infrastructures is represented by a particular network. So we have LEAPS, for instance, for the synchrotrons, LENS for the neutron sources, RADIATE for the ion sources, and so on. And that is exactly the point that I would like to make here, that we've seen this clustering going on in the past few years. We've seen how research infrastructures put themselves under a certain common umbrella, and then very often the umbrella organization will be the unified voice for a number of research infrastructures, and that coincides with a particular research community. And we see that this has quite a strong impact. Within that landscape analysis, we also look for common tools and key technologies to look beyond the borders of these 3 different domains for common interests. And I think that also this is important to identify within such a landscape analysis. Let me come back now to this example of the analytical facilities. And so here on this slide, you will find the logos and a short description of 7 organizations that bring together research infrastructures that work on common themes or common methodologies. I take the example here of LEAPS, which is the League of European accelerator-driven photon sources, so the synchrotrons and the free electron lasers, or LENS, its counterpart, but for neutron science, RADIATE, which is the counterpart for ion beams, and so on. And so what you will find is that these consortia, that they speak with one voice for that particular community, and that by now they've really established themselves very well, and where initially these were just like a group of research infrastructures, you see that they are now focusing much more on integration. And for instance, for the neutron community, discussions are going on if it would be possible on the European scale to work, for instance, with a one entry point for submitting proposals in neutrons. So you see that this is being established, and it goes rather fast, I would say. But then what has also occurred recently is that these different umbrella organizations, that they themselves also unite. And this has created the ARIE, which is a network. ARIE is an acronym that stands for Analytical Research Infrastructures in Europe. And here you see these different types of probes coming all together: photons, lasers, ions, protons, magnetic fields, neutrons, and electrons, together with their particular umbrella organization. And you see here that this is an additional level, in fact, where these different communities, these different consortia come together, all with a common goal of providing the most advanced tools for doing analytical research in Europe. And it's also nice to see that when such a platform is created, it can also be at the origin of other and more specific initiatives. So for instance, it has just a couple of months ago, there has been the launch of a network which is called Remade at ARI. So this is a network that builds on the existing infrastructures within this ARIE group with a specific focus on circular economy. And the idea is really that this is a one-stop access point. So if you have researchers in academia, but just as well in industry, in particular than in SMEs, they can provide their scientific question or their idea to this hub, and it will be the hub that helps them in figuring out where the experiment should be done to get optimal effect. And that alleviates the burden for the non-experts to have to go and study all of the different existing research infrastructures and very often going through the difficult task of having to find out where you can optimally do this experiment. So here the hub is doing that very important work for you. Another example in the same vein is NFFA, which is a European project, and the acronym stands for Nanoscience Foundries and Fine Analysis. And this focuses in particular on nanoscience, both experimental as well as theoretical aspects of nanoscience. And the interesting part here is that a scientist from academia or from industry can come forward with a particular scientific problem. And then at NFFA, you can apply for different solutions. So for instance, rather than going to synchrotron A for a set of experiments A and going to neutron source B for another set of experiments, here you can just come with your research proposal, and different probes at different facilities will be invoked to try to solve that scientific question. This turns out to be an access model that is very successful and also very attractive for academia as well as for industry. Applicants are very strongly supported, and what is especially important here is that it allows a broader topic-oriented approach. So again, I show this as an example where this clustering of research infrastructures is really providing a higher level of access to the users. Upcoming is a similar initiative from LEAPS, from the photon sources, which will be directed specifically towards quantum technology. I also mentioned here already a couple of times the access for small and medium enterprises, and that again is something that is very high on the priority list of the European Commission nowadays. So when you organize yourself within your community and with your research infrastructures, please also pay attention to the way that you as an individual research infrastructure or as a cluster, how you can interact with industry. Without going into all the details, basically you can say that the involvement of industry can be in two ways. Industry can be a supplier, but that is then very often not a supplier of off-the-shelf materials, but that together with research infrastructure, you create and you develop further refinements of particular tools. I think, for instance, about detectors, electronics, and so on. But you can also have industry as a user where you have knowledge transfer, and that is very important. There are, again, many examples of different areas where this can occur. This also brings along a number of issues that I will not discuss here, but my message here is simply think about this and try to take that as an additional ingredient in your discussions of today and later. With that, I would like to end. Once more, I regret that I was not in person at your meeting, but I hope that you found this nevertheless an interesting and inspiring contribution to your meeting. And I wish you a lot of success with your future endeavors. Thanks again for the invitation and all the best.
Okay. Unfortunately, say Kristiaan, you can hear me online. We are behind because those presentations took a bit longer than we anticipated, but I think we'll go ahead with a couple of the small ones, the short introductions, but we'll continue the introductions after lunch. So the first presentation is by Ahead, Lorenzo. We'll get yours up. I think Kristiaan made many of the comment points that will come up for the discussion later, so that will be good. Okay, so we're now just going to have the presentations from each of the sort of networks that are represented here today, either online or in the room. And the first will be the Ahead Consortium, represented by Lorenzo.
Okay, thank you. My name is Lorenzo Natalucci. I'm working in ENAF in Rome, and I will talk about Ahead project that had started actually in around 2015 with the first cycle as starting community, and now is running as an advanced community in the EU Horizon 2020 program. The main goal of Ahead is the domain is the high-end astrophysics domain, and we represent, in fact, the European research infrastructure for this domain. The main goal of Ahead is, of course, to improve the level of integration reached by the previous program, and the main achievement of this new cycle called Ahead 2020 is including also the new multi-messenger science and the European gravitational wave community. So Ahead 2020 has started in 2 March 2020. He was initially scheduled to end in March 2024, but we obtained a later extension for COVID mitigation up to 1 December. So we have a total duration of 4.75 years, and for an over budget of about 10 million euros. The consortium is coordinated by ENAF. Luigi Piro in my institute is a coordinator, and I am the project scientist, and comprises 38 European institutions, also including 3 small medium enterprises and 1 large industry. Of course, the number of laboratories and departments are higher. We reach, I think, above 45 institutes participating to this high-end astrophysics project. So the goals are essentially integrate and coordinate national activities in energy astrophysics, or also reaching out to the multi-messenger domain. We concentrate on both the future high-energy and multi-messenger facility and the present one. For the future facilities, we want to push the limit of the current technology and strengthen the infrastructure. And so we're talking about several facilities like Athena, for example, but also closer to launch satellites like nanosats, Einstein probe, Theseus, possibly, and also other facilities that are not pertaining to electromagnetic astronomy, but are equally important for multi-messenger domain, like the KM3net, LIGO Virgo, and in the future the Einstein telescope, that is the future generation. Go to the future generation of GW interferometers. So what we do is we have a program of access to facilities first, we give access free of cost to a network of ground-based test and calibration facilities. So hardware teams can go to a set of these facilities to do their hardware development, calibration and testing. So we're talking about, for example, thermal vacuum chambers, beam lines for X-ray and gamma rays, and beam lines also for synchrotron sources and so on. And another aspect of this access program is to ensure the maximum return from the present and near future observing facilities. So develop and provide access to, sorry, this is not pertaining access, but it's more development tools. So develop tools for accessing data and make them usable, and also advanced data analysis and theory tools in the field of X-ray and gamma ray astronomy and multi-messenger. So promote various level high energy and multi-messenger astrophysics, and prepare, of course, the community to the exploitation of these new facilities under development in Europe by training young researchers and giving this service also through the TNA Expert Center. These are a few examples of activities. There's a few pictures showing, for example, space technology development in the field of optics, for example, but we have also detector, macrocalorimeters, and future detectors technology. We give, as I said, access to facilities and access for training for data analysis and models, and we show in this picture on the bottom left. So researchers, young researchers, but also experienced scientists can go to these centers and train or collaborate on specific aspects of data analysis and models. We have, in the field of GRA activity, we have development of tools. An example is the multi-messenger tools, for example, to handle alerts for the multi-messenger, multi-platform, multi-satellite, and multi-facilities, also including ground. We have this Astro Colibri that is shown in the picture, that is an application for smartphone that is now being developing very fast. Tools for maps and analysis, and also tools for follow-up. So developing software for afterglow of gamma ray bursts and so on. And also we have laboratory astrophysics, and you can see here these are studies aimed at improving the theoretical knowledge of the transition of the X-ray to atomic transitions that is needed for the exploitation of the high energy resolution X-ray instrument. So we still do not know with precision what are the theoretical cross-sections from the different element transitions. So we have campaigns of measurement and determination of this aspect. And finally, we have a strong networking activities at all levels, so about meetings, schools, also social media dissemination, and in particular we have also a visitor program besides the TNA program that allows researchers and engineers to visit institutes and collaborate in developing their skills and developing analysis and exploitation. So this is my last slide. We tried to throw with Luigi some ideas about how to go forward. Of course, the experience of AHEAD was very good in integrating the energy community at all levels and develop synergies among the different fields and also community, I must say, spanning this multi-wavelength, multi-messenger and astroparticle physics. So There is a high potential of creating collaboration across different communities that we experience within this cycle. And multi-wavelength science is increasingly important, also favoring these synergies, like the studies of Transcend Universe, Training Center, support to observation proposal that we give to the teams and researchers. Space technologies teams have important analogies with studies of planets and solar systems, and this is maybe a target for future calls in Horizon Europe. We don't know, maybe we can discuss that later. And TNA for experimental facilities also is very important, and space-based environmental tests, UV and X-ray beam lines and so on, open across board, and in fact have exploited also by small medium enterprises. Also solar system exploration teams have used our facilities. TNA to big observing facilities, I mean satellites observing the universe, are made ahead through the expert center. So we cannot give direct access to data from these facilities, but we could, for example, improve and allow the teams to analyze data through this expert center in the TNA area. We have this role of our laboratory astrophysics across the board. That is something which is also projected in the future. And our high-level messages is in principle to European Union, but of course in general to the different communities, are that this strong GRA that we're doing with ahead, and in general, GRA is fundamental for improving the present and future facilities, and the current scheme of decoupling the GRA from TNA in Horizon Europe is probably not the most effective one. So we just emphasize this fact that our community is exploiting not only these big infrastructures like ESFRI on ERIC, but also in the largest parts, small to medium-sized facilities that are also not properly covering in the existing scheme of calls, possibly not. So also we think that the TNA approach in the field of high energy astrophysics is very important, to have this expert center going forward to and also be improved in their services that provide to in the future as successfully implemented now. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are actually at the coffee break time, but I'd like to get a couple more talks in before we can, particularly for those people online who may not be able to join us at 2 o'clock. So the next talk is by APPEC. Katharina, are you online? Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm online. I can hear you. Sorry for not being there.
Yeah.
So does it work?
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay. So I try to hurry a little bit, but it's a pleasure that I can participate today. I'm Katharina Henjes-Kunst. I'm the APPEC General Secretary. APPEC is the Astroparticle Physics European Consortium. It's not, it's an international coordinating structure. It's not an European funded project anymore. APPEC came out of 2 ERA-nets, which were funded earlier from, I think, 2006 on. And then after the funding period was over, APPEC was founded by basically funding agencies all over Europe to coordinate astroparticle physics in Europe. Yeah, it was funded in 2012. Now we're 11 years old, and we have 18 plus 1, which is Russia, suspended member countries, but 18 still member countries which are part of APPEC. We run on a common budget, we call it, or a common fund. So each member country pays a little small sum to make make conferences possible, and the working power is given by national institutes, for example, DESY, for my input. Okay. So we have basically 3 APPEC bodies, which is the General Assembly, the Scientific Advisory Committee, and the Joint Secretariat. The General Assembly makes, basically strategic decisions. We have some observers, for example, Colin, who was online in the beginning of this session. Okay, is observer for Astronet, and we have also CERN, EGFA, EPS, HEP, and NUPEC, and ESO as observers. And then we have Scientific Advisory Committee and the Joint Secretariat, which runs the functional centers. For the Scientific Advisory Committee, we are now, or we will now change the people in the Scientific Advisory Committee. During the last 2 years, they made a very great job because we made an update of our midterm, or made an update of our roadmap. We made a midterm evaluation document, which will be published around September. It's now finalized, but it's not a glossy paper until now. And this was done by the Scientific Advisory Committee. And we had last year, maybe some of you were there in Berlin, a big town meeting discussing the contents, and it was really a success. Okay, so then this very short, we have so-called functional centers. This is where people work for APPEC a little bit more. These functional centers give working power into APPEC. Okay. And the tasks of APPEC are mainly, or the main task is to guarantee the coordination of European astroparticle physics in Europe between funding agencies and visibility. And therefore, for example, this road mapping is our core activity, that we have a roadmap, update this roadmap, have with all scientific or sub-scientific fields, strategic discussions on the topics. And then, of course, some topics, smaller topics around, for example, organized tech fora on special topics, have also engagement with society, similar to Astronet. This was also a part in our update of the roadmap, because this is something where now the people ask for. Okay. Yeah, and these basically are our scientific issues. So we don't have so many space-related topics, but sometimes there's an overlap. Okay. And that's all. I think I made it in 5 minutes. Thank you very much. So I'm open for questions, as I'm not participating in or being there in the coffee break or in lunch break. You can also send questions to me. I'm also registered and check the as participant, and I check the RUFA, so we can also, if you have questions, contact me there.
So thanks very much.
Yeah.
Mark Allen, are you online? I can see you're there.
Okay, thank you. So yes, my apologies also for not being there. My institute is hosting the National French Astronomy meeting at the same time, so I'm obliged to be at my home institute. I'm really pleased to give you a quick overview of ESCAPE in the context of these networks. ESCAPE has been a European H2020 funded project which ran for 4 years, but which came to a conclusion in January this year. And it is a project which combines many of the ESFRI in the domains of astronomy, astroparticle and particle physics, with a program that has been to address the open science challenges of those infrastructures. So it's really about the data, about the software, and the interoperability of services so that you can do science. So you can see there that it includes some of the big infrastructures that are coming, like the SKAO, like the CTA, like the EST, but also others that are, you know, existing and operating now, like Ego Virgo, like ESO, and like Jive. We also include Ruben LSST, but really only as a small component there. So the next slide, the very core of it is the work program that we actually did in the ESCAPE funded project between 2019 and 2023, where, I mean, we did this work in the context of the European Open Science Cloud, which is a big initiative at the level of Europe for making what they call a web of fair data. So FAIR is this, you know, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable acronym. And we had a program that combined those partners, the ESFRI, but also partners from universities, from institutes, to build a prototype data lake, have a prototype science platform, have an open source software repository, to do citizen science. And the part that I was leading was about the interoperability of data through what's called the virtual observatory. So that's connected mainly to the astrophysics related data providing partners, and to enable people to use those data together. So that was kind of the core of ESCAPE, which we now call VRE services, Virtual Research Environment Services. And then looking to the future, ESCAPE is now not a funded project, but a open collaboration. And the other boxes that are sort of more near the outside are what we're thinking about in terms of the future that we develop into, you know, that we do projects for open science objectives, that we look at the technology that enables FAIR, that we look also at the career development for open science in terms of what profiles are needed, and also connect to the bigger aspects of data spaces as they're expressed by the European Commission and the European projects. There's also an idea of competence centers and a virtual research institute, which has been proposed in one of the calls that are open now. So our outlook is to stay connected and really be part of the deployment of the European Open Science Cloud in Europe, where we bring in not just ESCAPE, we are connected to the other science clusters like PANOSC, like ENVRI-FAIR, like SHOC. So there's a bit of coordination between those. We realize that they need to, you know, the European Open Science Cloud really needs to be science driven, not technology driven. So that's part of the approach. There is a community-based approach. So I was really glad to see Astronet and APPEC there. Some of the ESCAPE work is expressed also in the context of GENA, which is combining some of those networks together. We're organizing ourselves to be part to propose in the opportunities of Horizon Europe. And we actually have an event coming up on the 7th of July, which is open to all for the ESCAPE Open Collaboration development and discussion. So with that, thank you very much for inviting me, and happy to answer questions, and I'll try to be online a bit later as well as, so Nigel, please inform me about that.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. We start the open discussion at 2 o'clock, so I hope you can join us then. Now, is there anybody online who won't be able to make the 2 o'clock who would like to make their contribution now? Otherwise, if you can join us at 2, we will continue the introductions at 2. But I hope that gives us a bit of a landscape. And I think we're already some common themes coming out from people. So let's go and get coffee now. Then we will come back in, because you've seen, I think everybody's talked about this idea of widening the community, getting things. And that's a common problem, which effectively we are asked to address in all our European projects. But socially, economically, we need to address it because we do need to widen out the people to make sure we have a community that's more representative of the world. So we'll come back in here and run that particular session, and then we have lunch, and then at 2 o'clock we'll continue the introductions, and then we've got time for the general discussion. Right, so we're going to try and get through these sort of introduction slides again, just to know everybody who's here, because I say some people we're meeting for the first time. So the next research infrastructure is ChETEC Infra, and Daniel hopefully can hear us.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nigel, for the kind invitation. So my name is Daniel Bemmerer. I'm from Dresden, Rossendorf, Germany, Helmholtz Center, Dresden, Rossendorf, HZDR. I'm the PI of this ChETEC Infra starting community of research infrastructures for nuclear astrophysics. I apologize for not being there in person, but I had so many business trips in the last 3 weeks. My wife was starting to make threatening noises, so at least I will try to do my best online. ChETEC Infra, it's a interdisciplinary basic science, nuclear astrophysics. We have a little over 30 partners in a number of countries, and we are networking 13 research infrastructures, which are coming from 3 different domains: nuclear accelerators or ion accelerators, small and medium-sized telescopes, and one supercomputer. We have a number of networking activities, which I want to mention here: nuclear reaction rate evaluation, where we have some work in progress. We are developing processing pipelines for astronomical observational data, master classes, which are one-day teaching events for high school students in many local languages, and an online school. Oh, great. Those are our infrastructures. So that's the second of 3 slides. So to make sure that I stay in time. So we have a number of accelerators. So I will start on the top left. This is an underground ion accelerator. Then we have a couple of accelerator mass spectrometry systems. That's also important for nuclear astrophysics, but I believe also important for meteoritic planetary science. We have some telescopes in Central Europe, actually, and one is in the Czech Republic, one is in Bulgaria, and one is actually on the Canary Islands, but operated by the Scandinavian countries, the Nordic telescope. And then we have a number of different sources of neutrons and ions, which are available. We have one more telescope, I forgot, it's in Lithuania, actually, a very important one, a nice multi one, currently undergoing some renovations, but it will be fully available very soon. And we have one cluster, supercomputing cluster, sorry, it's too early after lunch. So those 3 different types of infrastructures are all needed in nuclear astrophysics, because basically what we are doing is we are looking at astronomical observations, comparing them to models, astrophysical models, and looking also at the microphysics input, in particular the nuclear physics input. And so for the astronomical observations, of course, telescopes are needed. For the model, usually supercomputers needed, and for the microphysics input, we have the laboratories. And that's already my final slide. So our transnational access is running. We have a little more than a year to go with calls. We have calls every 3 months. So it's a quite intense schedule for everybody, including the user selection panel. But it's good for our interdisciplinary field, because there it's actually evolving relatively quickly. So we can't work with a yearly schedule. We want to keep up, of course, this TNA until the end of our project, which will be in a little less than 2 years, April 2025. We have done, obviously, during the COVID phase, some tests on remote transnational access, and also partially remote or hybrid, you could call it, and understand now the issues connected to that, which are not negligible. We're producing many data products, which I just list here, and where we are still working on a good business plan for the sustainability beyond 2025, so beyond the end of this currently running project. We have basically from the start had a collaboration with the Europlanet RI, and also most of our infrastructures are part of this proposal, where we will, I think, learn the outcome only in the fall with Space Science RI. And so the reason for that is actually that nuclear physics signatures are very important for planetary science, and planetary science is very important for understanding nuclear astrophysics. So I think that's each discipline really needs the other one. And we still have to understand a little better, I think in the future, to leverage this better for education and also for outreach. And I just have one item for discussion, maybe later can be discussed, whether we can think about even better, I mean, I know many are already doing that, but even better leverage these capabilities which we do have for this priority climate science, both mitigation and understanding what's happening. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. So the next speaker is Wolf. So we're now going to have two presentations, which brings in the astrobiology community. And Wolf's going to talk about the first one, which is the Europlanet Astrobiology Institute, which is also has some links with our colleagues in the ESF. So Wolf?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay, I try to be as concise as possible. It's about the European Astrobiology Institute and the European Astrobiology Campus. The European Astrobiology Institute is unique because it is a consortium of institutions and not a consortium of individuals. There are 7, hopefully soon, core organizations, which are large research organizations like DLR, CNRS, CNES, and INAF. And then there are 22 participating institutions, which gives us a budget of about 80,000 euros a year because they're paying into that. We have, of course, a management committee with a chair and 2 vice chair. The chair happens to be me. And also the working group leaders are going into the management committee. We have a general assembly meeting every year, and we have also a board of trustees supervising us. And Nigel already mentioned that we are organized along working groups. So these form the backbone of the institute. There are 6 scientific working groups. We hope that they cover everything in astrobiology, which is probably impossible. And then we have got activity working groups, which are then dealing with things like funding and policy, with education, outreach, and also the European Astrobiology Campus, which is our training unit. We also have project teams on smaller subjects like science fiction in astrobiology to raise awareness of science. There is a project team on protoplanetary disks, for example. So that is some smaller groups that are made up of people with the same interest. So what is the European Astrobiology Institute doing? So first of all, we have the biannual European Astrobiology Conference, which just went ahead in May. We had about 250 participants, which made it historically the largest astrobiology meeting in Europe. There are summer schools with the European Astrobiology Campus as training organizations. We usually have 1 or 2. This year we have 2, and an event for young scientists. Because of the pandemics, these activities were mostly halted. We have also smaller workshops, which were run by working groups. Last year we had one in Heidelberg on the formation of on the path to molecular complexity, which meant that they were following all the chemistry from interstellar medium until the first biomolecules. And it was a very good event because it showed us how big the progress has been last time. Then we are applying also for funding. we have just been successful to get a cost action, which is called the Birth of Solar Systems, which is actually organized by one of the project teams. We do also outreach. One of the more successful things was an anthology, Life Beyond Us, where we had 20 pairs of contributions, of which one was always a science fiction story and one an essay written by a scientist to explain the science behind the science fiction story. Because we all agree science fiction is a great thing to get people interested in science. But sometimes people do not really have an idea about the border where the science stops and where the fiction starts. And there the scientist comes in and then can explain the science behind or the science dealing with the science fiction. Then we do dissemination and intellectual output. There are two working groups now writing a major review article, and we'll see what comes out of that. One important activity is the so-called ERI Academy, which is a course, which is a series of online lectures, always devoted to 4 different subjects in astrobiology. And people attend there and do some smaller activities afterwards, like writing a small essay or actually doing a small presentation. And then they get also credits for that. So there's an official course, which is organized by the Centro de Astrobiologia and the University of Tartu. And also, last but not least, we have our bi-weekly seminars. And we invite you to actually take part into those. We are now going into the summer break, but we will start with them in late September, October again. That was it for me. And all the info is available on our website, which is very simple, europeanastrobiology.eu. That was it. Can you switch? Yeah. So I've got just some announcements to illustrate also a little bit better what the European Astrobiology Institute is doing. So first of all, we have a just a moment. This is a little bit different. Sorry, it's not really the good format, but I think it will work like that. So we have got a student and early career scientist workshop on microsatellites and their use in planetary and astrobiology research. This is now running the 3rd time. It's very appreciated by the students. They get lectures, but they also get hands-on experience on planning of small satellite mission. And it was interrupted by the pandemics, but we want to revitalize it. Applications are still available for the summer school impacts and their role in the evolution of life, happening in Nördlingen in Germany in autumn. Very nice place, very nice medieval city, in the middle of the best preserved young large impact crater. So the whole city is inside a huge impact crater, and there are geologically very interesting formations there. Then we have 2 events on the Azores, namely a conference on life in the subsurface in Angra do Heroísmo, the nicest city of the Azores, to my opinion. We have a very good row of interesting speakers, and also there the registration and abstract submission deadline will be very soon. This event will be preceded by the European Astrobiology Institute Summer School, Volcanism, Plate Tectonics, Hydrothermal Vents, and Life, where still applications are welcome by students and scientists until 1st of July. And last but not least, with a conference on commercial space exploration and travel, challenges and chances. Sorry, that has been a little bit disordered here. And this will be in September in Kiruna. Also here, we have very good speakers and a very interesting program. And I can tell you, Lapland is a wonderful place to visit in early autumn because you get all the nice Indian summer colors. So that was it for me. And I will hand over then to the next speaker. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much, Wolf. Our next speaker is also related to astrobiology. Lena, I think I saw you just flash up there online.
Yep, I'm here.
So, okay, so Lena, if we get your slides. Lena is going to represent the European Astrobiology Network Association. And there is links between them and the EAI, but it's another part. And Lena will perhaps take us on that.
Okay, I hope you can
Great.
see my slides.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'm actually speaking on behalf of Jean-Pierre de Vera, who was with us this morning, but couldn't join now for the afternoon session. And he prepared a couple of slides to present to you EANA, so the European Astrobiology Network Association, and the role that we play in astrobiology since 2001, actually. And I'm giving the presentation because I'm the vice president together with Rosa de la Torre Norris, but also Ruth Sophie Taubner, the EANA secretary, is also here in the room. Yeah, so what is actually EANA? So EANA is a grassroots organization. So it's actually very different to the Astrobiology Institute, since the basic concept is actually to, on the one hand, be a network of networks, so the different astrobiology societies that we have all over Europe, but also to connect the actual individual, those that are actually interested in astrobiology become members. So it's not institutes that are members, but of course we do have our regular conferences, and then the institutes may actually support the local organization. We do have continuous support by ESA also, a variety of journals and publishers, societies, and the way how EANA works is that we have elected representatives from all countries that actually have an astrobiology society or a large network of astrobiologists. And in addition to these representatives, we also have the same number of elected members of the council, which are elected every 3 years. What is EANA, or what is the role of EANA? Mostly it is really a platform for the scientific exchange between astrobiologists. The main networking activities actually happening during the regular conferences, which have been annual conferences until EAI started with the Beacon conferences. So now we are actually alternating between the EANA conference and the Beacon conference from now on. We also, in the years when we don't have an EANA conference, have either a spring school or a seminar to keep the community together. And we are actually very proud that UpgradeD is actually a network that came out of EANA. And we also continuously support early career scientists, of course, not only with travel grants for the EANA conferences, but also by initiating the Space Factor student contest, where we give a training and presenting platform for our early career scientists. We also have a website which is used to inform and distribute different kind of informations about astrobiology events, activities, also at the national level, recent publications in the community, job advertisement, conferences, and so on. And our members, even though we are mostly a European network, we also have members from abroad, and therefore our members are also involved in NASA, JAXA missions. We have a representation, ESA topical teams, and so on. We are also supporting, and several of us are members of the EAI institution as a virtual institute. And if you would like to discuss with us more about EANA, we also have our biannual meeting actually coming up in Madrid in September. We were actually quite overwhelmed this year with registrations. So we have more than 230 registrations already, even though the registration deadline is still far ahead in the future, and almost 200 abstracts. So it's going to be a large astrobiology conference in Madrid. And even though we currently have a waiting list, if you're interested, please just register right now. You will be on a waiting list, and we are currently looking for additional rooms to try to have everyone interested in EANA join us in Madrid. So this was everything that we prepared for today.
Thank you very much, Lena. Gerry, can I ask you to do next, and then it will be easier for me to do the Europlanet straight after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Find my slides on there.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm giving you a very brief overview of the Opticon radio Net Pilot, or ORP. And so we're a pilot. You can see the technical information there. The key thing is that we're a federation of two long-standing I3 projects and communities, one RadioNet covering radio astronomy infrastructures, and one Opticon giving optical infrared facilities. And there are several people here I'll introduce in the structure, so that we have a strategy arm, which is led by myself and Mike Garrett, who's the director of Jodrell Bank activity, representing the two halves. But here also we have Stefan Bassar. Stefan, you stand up or something so people know who you are. Maybe the camera will find you. Who's the from CNRS, the coordinator, and also you saw her this morning, Aga Slovakovska. She's the director of the JIVE-ERIC Radio Observatory, which is based in the Netherlands and partly on our executive board. And she's here representing the radio astronomy infrastructures. And then there's Gudrun Tausch-Peabody, who with me does the management and strategy from the Opticon side. And we also have Isabella Rotman, who's the RadioNet manager, who's there. Okay, so how does this change? That's how it changes. Right, so if only just going to be a brief introduction, because fundamentally we fully agree with and endorse all the points made this morning by Lorenzo, Natalucci and the AHEAD program. He raised all the issues and challenges that we approach, but it's a little bit different for us because we are one of only 3 pilots. And the pilots, the 3 are there. There's AWP in astronomy, there's ATMO access and atmospheric chemistry, and NFFA, the nanofabrication. You heard NFFA described this morning in the list of instructions we got from the ESFRI presentation as to how to organize our futures. So we are the only 3 pilots in this part of the EC. And we are required to produce what the EC describe as a strategic vision of the relation between our subjects and the EC. And that's really a bit too much for one organization. So that's why we'd be happy to collaborate. But the sort of fundamental questions is what is sometimes called a landscape analysis. Exactly who are we? Now, we're optical and radio astronomers, we're ground-based astronomers, we're electromagnetic astronomers. You can define us in many, many ways. And we verge into multi-messenger astronomy. But astronomy is a vast subject. It goes everything from micrometeorites through to the cosmic microwave background, and in facilities that are tiny, right up to things like the James Webb, which are very expensive indeed, and very complicated structures. So who we are, there is no definition of astronomy that makes sense. It's a very, very broad subject in the same way that biology is a big subject, or chemistry is a big subject, or even nanofabrication is a big subject. There are thousands of groups work in this. And so you have to define subsets that some particular organization of the Venn diagram so that you can overlap for whatever particular goal you're trying to achieve. And similarly, the landscape and the concepts. Although astronomy is arguably the oldest of the sciences, having even been done in ancient Mesopotamia. Right now, we are in a startling growth period for technology reasons and access to space missions and real investigations of our own solar system, but also right back to the early universe. And so our landscape is changing spectacularly rapidly. And so a 10-year-old prediction of what the future will be like now is completely disconnected from what we are actually doing now, and it's going to change even faster, as we saw a little bit in the road mapping exercise early on. So it's very difficult. It's also complicated, as Lorenzo pointed out this morning, is that this EC way, the map way in which they decide on how to form future planning and links to communities has become totally unbalanced, in that it's focused on big, expensive ESFRI scale infrastructures. And 99% of the people spend 99% of their time using things that are not ESFRI scale infrastructures. They're the little things that complement they're big, expensive, big international world-class facilities, but they complement the ESFRI scale facilities. And that's what most people spend most of their lives doing. And that connection between the strategy, the EC understanding of big, exciting, new, glossy things and what real scientists actually do seems to have been lost under Horizon Europe. It was much better under the previous scheme. Anyway, and then the fundamental question we all continually being asked is transnational access sustainable beyond EU funding? And as our investigations and other people have said, transnational access is one of the greatest triumphs of the European Commission. It's one of the very few really unambiguously clever ideas that they've implemented and has proven to be a success. But they're now telling us that we've got to do it without EC funding. That's what the word sustainable means in EC speak. It means we're not going to give you any money, but we expect you to do the work anyway. So how do we write position papers and make this approach? Remember, we're a pilot, we're required to do this, so we're working on it. But frankly, it would, given the complexity of the landscape, as I've just outlined, it would be smarter if instead of getting 25 self-interested subgroups of the, in quotes, astronomy community, putting in their own little strategies and proposals. It would be smarter if we could coordinate. Now that's a challenge, partly because our eyes are very diverse, and I've just listed a few parameters there in the next few bullet points I won't need to read out, but also because the more diverse a community that you try and fit into one thing, the less able are we to actually come up with a coherent single focus policy. You end up with a lot of bland, well-meaning but unhelpful generalities. And so that is the challenge that we have to face, frankly. Right at the bottom is the bit that Gudrun and I are working on right now, is what are the management models? Well, the Opticon is a federation. This seems to, some of these other things that have been put together by the Commission are actually combinations where communities are forced together to become a new community, so that there's an artificial mixing of things put together to create new structures. Now, maybe that works sometimes, particularly in the very, very new fields, but in practice, where you have established communities, you have established vested interests and people's careers, and people are not generally prepared to just have their careers messed about by somebody else. They want them to stay as they are. And so this concept of federation is probably critical, is that when we come together, it's necessary basically to build a set of silos and not a great melting pot, because that's unlikely to work. The other point is that by the bottom line there, is that what the EC has done so far is put together more and more communities inside the same budget. And this is just deeply under-imaginative by the Commission, and what that means is they are simply cutting budgets and cutting budgets and cutting budgets while expecting us to do more. And I think we have to say no to that, frankly. If they expect us to work hard to create new communities, then they have to fund them. But anyway, our conclusion is at the top there, is that based on our experience and given our commitments to the Commission for these documents we have to provide, we're very happy to collaborate through some sort of a broader discussion to allow this combination of federation and merging as a coherent set of documents. So we, in general, supportive of Nigel's suggestion that we get together and act together. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Gerry's opened up a lot of the discussion which we're going to move into. Okay, I'll just, and for people in the room, most of you should know Europlanet by now, but of course we have got some visitors and guests, so I'll just do the quick summary of the Europlanet slides to complete, and then we will open up the discussion with some discussion points. So just to put it in context, Europlanet was created in 2005 under the FP6 program, and it was to support planetary science community in Europe to perform its world-leading research. 2005. Why 2005? That was when the Cassini-Huygens mission, one of the first ESA planetary missions, reached the Saturnian system, and Huygens was one of the first, well, really the first, all-European built mission, if you like. It piggybacked on it. It was one that went down to Titan. So at that stage, the people of the community felt that it was time for the European planetary science community to work together more. There wasn't any architecture for doing that, and there was at that stage the example of Opticon and RadioNet, and then people thought, oh yeah, okay, they've done it in the astronomy side, optical telescope side, we should do something in the planetary side. We then very fortunately have had 3 rounds of infrastructure funding under FP7 and 2 under H2020. And that meant that by 2009, since 2009, we've created this infrastructure composed of research facilities for the community to use, slightly different than some others. Yes, we have the laboratories with overlap of some of the AHEAD and ChETEC. We have telescopes, which has overlap with ARP and RadioNet. And we have something different. We also have field sites because we can't actually go to these planets and walk around on them, but we do need to maybe find analogs so that we can test out the instrumentation that does. Also, and I know it's been mentioned perhaps in passing by the other research infrastructures, there is also this degree of virtual access, these online tools, which are aligned to Mark talking about the ESCAPE project. So this is our heritage. This is what we have, and if you've been here this week, you'll have heard about these. We have the Transnational Access Program, which I've just talked about, and then we have VESPA, GMAP, SPIDER, and machine learning work packages. VESPA, GMAP, and SPIDER are all tools that have been developed. Machine learning is developing tools for the planetary scientists to use in big data. Again, our astronomy colleagues have used machine learning and AI. They're going to, the big new telescopes. You're not going to do it manually. You're going to do it with a huge amount of big data. It's got to be processed, and perhaps the planetary space missions have been smaller in the amount of data that they send back. But that's no longer the case, particularly if you take into account the work being done on exoplanets. We then also built a community because that was one of the kind of first ideas that although we would be doing the science, we would also be building the community. And as you have heard, we had the annual conference, the APPEC annual conference, which is the largest sort of planetary science-focused conference in Europe. It's held every year. And that's the EPSC. We've been trying very hard to try and get the engagement with industry. And as people know this week, that's a challenge. And we know our colleagues also, we may want to talk about that because none of the networks and none of the other research infrastructures in other topics either actually get as much interaction with industry as they would like, and certainly as the Commission would like. The sustainability section then came about with what would we do for the auspices of the community, and that is why we created the Europlanet Society in 2018, and again, this meeting this week is concentrated on that. But that still didn't give us a legal entity. That gave us an association, but when we were writing bids and everything, we were still going in as 38 individuals. So we really felt that we needed to have some kind of legal entity. Now, we explored ERICS, but ERICS didn't work for us. It didn't work with a bottom-up organization in quite the same way, particularly when we started. So we took the route, as several other research infrastructures have also done, to form an association, a legal entity. It's called an AISBL. You heard about that if you were here for Mankarine. It's a legal entity based in Brussels. We have the charter nicely signed by the King. It's nice to have something signed by the King, right? And so this is our structure now. So it enables us to maintain and claim the ownership and develop the things that have been built up over the 20 years. So the conference belongs to the society and the AISBL. Several of the tools that we've developed also belong to the society, so we can use those. But it means also we can participate as a beneficiary in projects. And you've heard about that, and I don't know if Didier's in the room. Didier around? No, I haven't seen Didier. Didier, our treasurer, has been working on that. But it also means that we can form MOUs because we have people we need to work with, particularly EOSC, where we are a member. We do talk with them, and members are part of been working with the ESCAPE team. But actually, the ESF had to represent us on the EOSC committees because we didn't have anybody to actually sign the legal document, which we can now. And this is also important for some things like the IPDA, the data, which works with NASA and ESA. We also sign the MOUs with other people. We have our conference every 3 years jointly with our American colleagues in the Division of Planetary Sciences. And this year, our conference is there in Antonio, and in 2 years' time, they will come here to Helsinki. But also agreements with things like the EGU and EAS. And up until now, who signed on behalf of Europlanet? Now we have this. So this is our structure that we have here. We have the association. We then don't want to hire lots of people ourselves, so we contract out the work and what we call the executive office, and that's the European Science Foundation, who worked with us since 2018 with the society. And then we have the conferences you can see here. All those structures underneath there are the groups and sections of the society, which we've talked about this week. You have a diversity committee, you've had the early careers. We have, because it's a membership organization, people join as an individual member, then they can join their regional hubs, because we wanted to have activities. We don't run everything from Strasbourg or Brussels. So we have a regional hub structure, and then as you see, we have the outreach and industry. And then on the right-hand side there in blue, this is where we've been talking about this week. This is where we're going to be involved in future work, in future projects, for example, EU projects or other projects and so on. On the right there, and joining the international organizations, etc. We also have a small spin out, which again some of you have heard about, for outreach. It's a company, and that will concentrate on educational tools and an educational and outreach project. So we can sell things through that, and they can also join. So that's how we're set ourselves up as we move forward. That's all I want to say about Europlanet, but now I'd like to just kick off the discussion for today's afternoon discussion. But just before I do that, Colin, is Colin there? Mark is there. I think Colin is there.
I'm here.
Yeah, Csilla, you're from the ESA is here as well. They gave their presentations this morning, and there may well be questions that you would like to ask them about their presentations or anything that's come up first before we open the discussion. So has anybody got any questions on the Astronet roadmap or the Terra Nova? Or is it all perfectly clear? Katharina.
I remember Astronet was collecting detailed information about astronomical stuff at least in Baltic states, maybe in some other states. I know you are soon will be outgoing president of Astronet, so maybe you should excavate and find this information and give for future such studies and investigations.
Thank you. Yes, so I mean, in the original Astronet science vision, the one back in 2008 or whatever, we did a lot more of collection of communities in different countries and the amount of money that was going into astronomy as best we could. When we initiated the current science vision and roadmap, we decided that exercise was not particularly useful. Nobody ever used the information. It was too difficult to draw parallels between the arrangements in different countries, and so we didn't do it again for this current science vision and roadmap. In between time, between the first time and this time, when Jan Paluš from the Czech Republic was part of Astronet, then he did do a fair amount of work in collecting certainly contacts and some information on the communities in various other parts of the wider European diaspora. But we haven't been pursuing that. We haven't got the effort to do it, unfortunately. As I said in my talk, we're very much reliant on people contributing in-kind effort, and that is an uphill struggle to get. I think some of the other organizations that we've seen today either benefit from the fact that they have some money, or they have some institutes who are willing to offer some effort to do these kind of things, and we just haven't got it. So it's a good point to make, and probably we should do it, and we can certainly raise it at the next board meeting as something that should be on our work program for the next couple of years. But at the moment, there's no immediate plans to do it through lack of effort.
Yes, I do not ask to do now because I know that you do not have financing for that, etc. But we had today a session on diversity and so on. So some data which were collected, I think should be somehow preserved and passed to for community.
Okay,
We
thank
can
you.
do that. I just wonder that the information that we have, as Astronet has, is rather out of date now. We haven't looked to update that information for several years. So I think if we were to become involved in something looking at diversity and equality and all the rest, then we would probably have to start again in gathering the information to make sure it's up to date, or find that information from other people who may well have it, to avoid us doing the exercise twice.
Yes, but then we could compare how everything developed with time.
Okay.
You make a fair point. Yeah, we'll look at that. Yeah.
Anita, I mean, that's one of the diversity, or one of the understanding our community was one of the things that we also wanted to do. It doesn't, the data isn't easy to find, or stroke doesn't exist.
Some data does exist, and there are other communities that have done surveys. So the RAS has been doing demographic surveys. The Royal Astronomical Society has been doing demographic surveys, I think, since 2010. So that's quite a good one to benchmark against. There was one of the geological, geophysical communities that started doing a survey last year. Obviously, the IAU does demographic surveys on a regular basis as well. So I think, as I said in the last session, we as the planetary community, because we don't really map particularly well to any of those, we kind of overlap and cover quite a few broad areas, including, sort of the robotics areas and other bits and pieces. We do need to do our own. It's just a case of managing to identify some funding. So hopefully, at the end of the Europlanet project, we may be able to finally manage to do that. But it is something that we have the aspiration to do.
Okay, Agnieszka.
Could you just comment quickly on what's the biggest disadvantage of becoming an ERIC? I'm kind of curious. Why you haven't chosen this way of self-organization?
Well, at the time we were doing it, it was the time period, the complexity, and getting national governmental buy-in.
I thought that this would be your answer.
And we weren't the only ones. I mean, it was interesting that when we were at the meeting in Brno, the commission said, "Oh, well, you should form an ERIC," and then when they actually announced how many ERICs there was only 18 or something. It was a very small number compared to the number of networks and everything that had been formed. Because that was the reason. People said it was and also then who was controlling it? Look at the board. Does it represent the community, or does it represent the funding agencies, etc., which is not necessarily the community? And Europlanet was felt to be a bottom-up organization. Which brings me to a comment for you, Colin. The Astronet roadmap has attempted to really put the science at the focus of the agenda. What science should we do? And that's really important because, if you don't really understand what science you want to do, you don't really know what infrastructure you want, and you don't know where the gaps are that needs to support that science. So I guess the question is how is that agreement on that science going to be adopted by the community? Is it going to be seen to be agreed by the community? I mean, everybody will have their own favorite bit of science that they want to have in there, which is absolutely impossible to have every sort of key word in there. I think probably the most advantage thing which I found in it, and I think also in writing the proposal, was this kind of idea of new areas of science that were emerging. One of those is, we've had this discussion, and I know a lot of people in the community say, well, you keep calling it astrophysics. Well, actually, there's a lot of chemistry there. And JWST is going to revolutionize our view on chemistry. So, our chemistry colleagues say, people keep writing physics there all the time. But actually, and then other people will say, well, what about astrobiology? Obviously, with the discovery of the gravity waves and black holes, I mean, the idea of these early, the early age of the universe now, we're finding things which shouldn't be there almost in JWST. So I really kind of think how you see that Astronet science being adopted by the community, because that can have an awful lot of directions in the future of what we do if we actually kind of have a general agreement on these are the key science topics for the future and that the community adopts those. So I just wonder how you could comment on that.
Well, we made a definite decision that that was the way we wanted to organise the report, in the sense, and as you've said, basing it on what's the science you need to do, what are the next big questions you need to answer, and therefore what capabilities, facilities, etc. do you need. That seemed to be a logical way to progress. However, we are just an advisory body, so I don't think we would expect, you know, communities necessarily to sign up to it and say, you know, we fully agree with everything that's in the science vision roadmap. As you say, we may well have missed things, and we may have a slant that is particular to the people who were involved in writing it, as these things often do. What we have tried to do is cover as broad an area of the understanding of astronomy, both today and going forward, as we can, in order that most people can find some links in there that are tuned to what it is they're trying to do. And looking back at the usefulness of the first Astronet science vision roadmap was really just nationally, that people could say, well, look, here's what Europe is doing, and we can see how our own community, be that in France or in Estonia, fits into it. Not picking on Estonia, but just another country. And also, if you were going to join a big new facility, or indeed a small one, as Gerry said, there's a whole range of things there, that you could see that the rest of Europe was also interested in doing this thing in some way. So I think that's the basis of where we got to how we've produced the report. And I don't think at the moment, other than advertising it, and both in terms of the science community and to the policymakers and funders, that we're looking for people to necessarily adopt it, but hopefully to reference it. And of course, it's a dynamic thing. You know, in 5 years' time, a lot of what we've written may not well be things have moved on or other priorities may have come along. When we did the previous one, I don't think multi-messenger science was, in the way it's highlighted now, was sure understood. But obviously that's a very topical thing, as is the whole area of sustainability, which, you know, wasn't really there 10 years ago.
Thank you, Colin. I'm going to dump this one on our ESA representative, right? ESA has its strategy, right? There have been many criticisms over the microphone coming. I don't think I'm probably saying anything which people would vastly disagree with. The connectivity between ESA strategies and the academic community has not always been seamless. So you have strategies like this, you have meetings like this. How is this going to interact with ESA? ESA, of course, always says, you know, the projects and the programs come from the community, but then you produce a strategy. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on this kind of interlink between these sort of networks, these sort of strategies, ESFRI, and what ESA would expect to get out of it, or even be thinking about reading it. Hard question, I'm sorry.
Okay, there are multiple questions here, I think. So, so indeed, ESA is asking the community what the community wants to do. So do you want to go to the moon? Do you want to go to the Mars? And what do you want to do there? So, and we need to come up with a strategy in order to achieve those goals. So we need to implement certain missions. We need to make partnerships with international partners. So so I think what we need to do is maybe have more community discussions, so more frequent discussions on what has been done and what could come next. So next steps. It's a bit more planning, I think, what is needed here.
Okay. I really should have just asked Agnieszka, because actually you didn't give a presentation, but maybe about Jive, you could just say a few things about the Jive, because I should have asked you to, really.
Sure. Yes, I don't have any slides. I can show maybe just one thing from the webpage, Jive. May I?
If you can. May need a local guys to help you.
Okay. Okay, maybe it's not that easy. Okay, so I was just say, Yeah, I was just thinking that maybe it might be useful if we can just open web page as jive.eu. So yeah, whenever you need to find any information about Jive, you can go to our web page. Jive stands for Joint Institute for VLBI ERIC. We are an ERIC, and we have 10 partners. 7 of them, they are full members. 3 of them, they are associated members, and the full members are, well, we are based in Dwingelo in Netherlands. So it is, of course, Netherlands, Italy, France, Spain, Sweden, UK, and Latvia. And then the associated partners are Germany, China, and South Africa. And what do? We basically provide the central service for European VLBI network. So basically from the idea, when you have an idea, you come to us, we help you to write the proposal. We will, then of course it will be evaluated by the PC proposal committee, and then if it's accepted, then we will schedule the observations, we will perform the observations, and then basically we will, at Jive, there is a heart of EVN, so there is a correlator. We will correlate the data. We will also perform data analysis, and basically you will get the ready product. So you will get the radio map. And of course, the whole problem is that we work as an interferometer. So basically we connect all the antennas, and I will try to show you the map. Yeah, so here is the map where you can see different radio telescope all over the world. And basically, if your proposal is accepted, and then of course the radio telescope they can observe, then we perform the observations. We have 3 sessions per year. Each session is 4 weeks. We also have so-called VLBI, which means that there are like special 2 days where we can, when we observe, and basically we correlate online. So we are, as you know, there is in radio astronomy, there is so far only one ERIC. There might be the second one coming, which is LOFAR ERIC. They are already quite advanced, and well, maybe hopefully this year there will be the second ERIC, which is again based in Netherlands, in Dwingelo. So we will have, like, you know, in Dwingelo we will have 2 ERICs, radio ERICs. And we, of course, we collaborate together. We are partners in ORP, in radio blog, but also in the, as you know, in SSRI proposal, and also in the ACME proposal. I don't know, any maybe questions? Yeah.
Thank you. So the rest of the session is meant to see we've got the width, and I think what we're seeing here, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of common interests maybe between us. I think there is, but you may disagree. How can we do some of these things better? So we had the example from Kristiaan this morning. Yes, the Commission is pushing for clusters. I think we should have a discussion about how we approach the Commission and tell them that maybe their ideas aren't the best. You will see at the moment in the literature that they're now talking about the time after Horizon Europe, and there are some statements even today saying the Commission's got its balance wrong. It really needs to concentrate on some real science and research and not try to go down too many other rabbit holes. And I think it's a very important time for the community to start to have that discussion and explain that what they're doing won't work, or isn't working, I think is more the point. And it's probably better if we do that as a collective. And it might be that in the space sciences, in the astronomy area, we are different than people doing perhaps virology or something. Otherwise, we might find there are common interests with the nanosciences. I mean, there is a proposal in this round for the semiconductors, and I have colleagues working in the semiconductor industry there. There, the Commission really wanted to push them with industry. And industry pushed back and said, look, there's a lot of problems here. Your structures of what you have, all this open access, you know, we're a commercial organization. Open access doesn't always work for us. You know, we're not going to tell the Chinese or the Japanese what we're doing. and some of the ideas you want to come and use our facilities, or we want to use your facilities. So I think there are different communities may well have different needs and structures. I think Gerry has been very clear, and I think he gets a lot of support for the fact that they've tried to push people together, which is almost just too broad, and that there may be things that we can work on together, but there may be other areas of science where actually, there are, in our area, space, it's a big area. You're going from cosmology on the one hand to origins of life on Earth and astrobiology on the other. That's basically encounters nearly all science. I have to say, I don't think anything's going to change in the Horizon Europe program. So I think any chance that we're going to try and get them to change halfway through the program, I just can't see them doing it. I don't think they're actually flexible enough to do it. I just don't think they have the capacity to suddenly say, okay, yeah, halfway through the program, much. Like a football analogy, you might be 5-0 down at half time and you realize that you need to change your tactics, but I don't think the EC is actually flexible enough to put on the substitutes and change it in the second half. I don't think the system allows them to do that. So I think we are probably have to have two things. One, we probably have to work with what they've got at the moment, and we have to think about the best ways we can do that. And that probably does mean having to come together in these collaborations as we did. But I think we have to, the game is to play for the next round and trying to get them to accept that the things they've been trying to do this time is not going to work. The ARP pilot is actually a very interesting thing because it kind of shows to be that, the ARP project was supposed to put recommendations into the commission, but they kind of pre-jumped the gun. That's what my feeling is. I don't know if Gerry agrees, but I kind of have, you were told to produce some of these reports that they could then use, but then they kind of jumped the gun and started to do things before your report had been written. So I think but I think that's what we're to do. I had proposed, as I say to most of you here, that Kristiaan did mention it this morning, that maybe all these networks that we have will be better finding some kind of structure where we work together, and that we have a network of networks or a cluster, or what was the other term Kristiaan used this morning? There was some other term he used this morning for everything together. It doesn't mean that each one's taking over the other one, but maybe we have a forum where we can talk, and when there are surveys and things come out, we actually find a way of coordinating our responses. That might be to ESFRI, for example. It certainly might be to many of these European Union surveys, so that they get a feeling of a common picture, if indeed we do feel we have a common picture. But I think, and then there may be more practical things that we can do. We've all got outreach programs, we've all got diversity programs. We're all trying to do similar things, and maybe there are ways there that we can share experiences, or we can share resources through our platforms, and we can advertise things together, and we can work together, and we can have some commonalities where they overlap in meetings and so on. So I'm going to throw it out to everybody to discuss the ideas. It is a completely free-flowing thing, so anybody could say, we just welcome your ideas and your support. But it would be nice at the end to think, okay, if we do agree that having got you all here together, that we could agree that maybe we want to hold a forum like this more regularly, and we can basically create a web page where all the institutes and research networks are linked to, and we have a kind of common Dropbox so that we can talk to each other. We have nominated people so that when, for example, ESFRI send out a survey, we can all know that we're replying to it, or EC send out a survey, we can respond to it. Or if we're organizing an event in the European Parliament, or we're invited to talk to the EC on the next generation of policy, we can discuss amongst ourselves what we think is the strong message to give to them. So that's my suggestion for bringing us all together. And there may well be, and I know people in this week have been talking about calls for 2024, the March 2024 call, with some options of some of these networks working together on those. I don't think this is the forum to talk about that, but certainly tonight at dinner, if anybody wants to, you all know each other now, so if you've got your idea that you've mentioned to me and to others this week, and you want to go and talk to somebody else and said your idea, that's a good time for doing it. So who wants to start a sort of general discussion? Don't be shy. Come on. I've got you all here. We made you all here. We're all in the room. Let's talk to each other.
I just want to make a comment about the interaction with large infrastructures, if I can.
Yeah.
So within the membership and observership of Astronet, we have both ESA and ESO and the SK, which arguably are the biggest sort of infrastructures in astronomy, largely, certainly for optical infrared and radio. And that's been very useful to have them there, listening to what's going on, advising us, and being able to engage with them. For the European Space Agency, said they do their own thing. We had quite good links with the Voyage 2050 exercise through Linda Tacconi and others when that was happening. I don't think we had any links at all with the Terra Nova exercise, even though it was going on in parallel and is somewhat in parallel with the Astronet one. So those sort of links, I think, are ones which would benefit from enhancing, and we've certainly got plans to talk to the incoming Director of Science, Karen Mundell, who's offered to talk to us about ways in which we can coordinate better the space and ground-based sides of the astronomy program in certain areas, but that doesn't include exploration. And I think from the presentation you saw this morning, of course, exploration includes quite a lot of things that are not necessarily related directly to the science questions that some of us would recognize, although there's good things in there and very important things. Some of it is a little bit on the margins of what people might see as to be the highest scientific priorities if you ignore the human and social and political sides of things. So it is difficult, I know, but I think we could do more to interact with those bodies whilst also maintaining a little bit of distance, because if you see the bodies that are revising the Commission or revising national ministries and policymakers, if they're too much linked to particular infrastructures, then you might well think that those infrastructures are there because they are, promoting their own agendas. I don't think that's true, but it could be an argument that's pointed against us if we go too far down the line. But I think we should go further down the line than we are at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Gerry, do you want to pick up some of because you had a very nice list of comments there, and maybe you'd like to take us through a few of those and your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for that invitation, that very prescient comment by Colin Vincent just then. It's true, we had this superb presentation from Csilla about the ESA, essentially the manned spaceflight program. And it's very important for us to realize in our interactions between astronomy and society that there are many, many ways in which astronomy interacts with society, and our research focus is only one of those. There's also the cultural and political and social support for the manned spaceflight program. Now, we're trying to put people on the moon, not because we're trying to understand the origin of the universe or the nature of dark matter or all these other big questions, but nonetheless, it is, in a way, it is what the public think is astronomy, even if it's not what astronomers think is astronomy. And so we need to be very clear that we don't inadvertently undermine each other. If ESA believes or is told by its governments, the governments control ESA, if ESA is told by its governments that manned spaceflight is something they should be doing, well, they should be doing it in the same way that if they're building their own rocket launchers, well, that's not science, that's engineering, but they should be doing it. That's fine. So we're not complaining that they're not spending that money on us. So we can be mutually supportive while recognizing there are things that are outside our boundary. And we have that same issue with the EC. The EC, not surprisingly, it's a political organization, and every few years they get new people in, and always in politics, the new people want to make their mark. And also the cultural pressures change. We know when the current Horizon program was being put together, that the big cultural problem in Europe was youth unemployment. Now, 10 years on, there are things happening to the north of us that have changed our perspective on urgent priorities, to say nothing of COVID having come in the meantime, and so on and so on. So we need to be conscious and aware that all these priorities change, while somehow trying to get the Commission to keep some continuity. The thing that they seem to find challenging, which the national funding agencies like STFC and Colin's Astronet partners and so on do very, very well, is funding things in the very long time scale. You know, the lifetime of an astronomical infrastructure is half a century, and it can often take a quarter of a century to build the case to actually get it going in the first place. So we're talking beyond human lifetimes here. And national agencies are very good at doing things on those timescales, even though their governments come and go. Whereas the international agencies clearly find that more difficult. And so whatever we do in the way of talking to the EC, we need to set our boundary conditions rather carefully. So we're not criticizing other things that are their business, but we are making the case for what is our business. And so I think Colin introduced that very well, actually, and it's an important boundary condition on everything we do.
Thank you. Csilla?
Terra Novae is an exploration program from the Human and Robotic Exploration Directorate. So this is where I'm based at. And what you refer to, the astronomy program is run by the Science Directorate. It's a different directorate. They have their own roadmap. And I know that the Terra Novae has little to do with astronomy observations from the moon or from low Earth orbit or from Mars. So we are focusing on those destinations and also more space biology and the astronauts and also technology development. So this is what the HRE is doing. So technology and science which enables those technologies. So, but also I know that there were studies conducted how we could maybe include astronomy on the far side of the moon. So how we could deploy radio astronomy telescopes on the far side in the future. So then to somehow cooperate with the astronomy community. That has been done, but I cannot promise on that anything.
Yeah, no, thank you for that clarification. But yeah, I agree entirely with your point. The human exploration is just one division of ESA, and there are these many other divisions. What I was really thinking was that quite recently, ESA produced this rather spectacular JUICE mission. So you can be proud of that. That's doing
yes, that's on the Science Directorate.
Next week, you've got Euclid going up and so on and so on. So yeah, ESA does all these things. We don't need to criticize any one part of it. We need to show that our bit of it is not in competition with other people's bit of it. You know, we're not competing with Ariane's, whatever it's called, Ariel 6, the rocket development. That's a different...
It's a different directorate.
Different directorate, that's the correct word, yeah. So I agree, yep.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting because on the lunar side, Europlanet obviously has people who are interested in the moon, but it was not in our explicit remit when we began. Europlanet tended to be planets, but it didn't include the moon. But now it does. And just last Wednesday, I was contacted by a consortium which are saying, "Oh, we need to we need a research infrastructure in Europe to deal with the mission to the moon. We need to bring people, all these facilities together, and we need to bring the scientists and the engineers together, and so on." And then they said, "Oh, Europlanet, obviously, are you interested in the moon?" And we talked about it this week as the idea. They're putting together this idea of a concept study. And yeah, I mean, you know, it may well be within that concept study. I mean, Ian Crawford, Gerry and I know very well, and so on, always has talked about how you could, you know, it's going to the moon is a political decision. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the fast tracking of that now. If the Chinese get there, we've got to be there, right? I mean, it's a lot of the political decisions that we made on that. I guess the question is that can we influence the fact that if we go there for political reasons, can we do the science too?
Yes,
and can we exploit the fact that, you know, increasingly Space 4.0, the idea of exploiting what we can do in space, and there are exciting technology developments and so on you can do in space. But Gerry's point, I mean, I think the point about what the public see, and I would also say probably what the politicians see, that, you know, if you go and talk to my MP and you said, "Oh, well, you know, I've got astronomy and I've got the moon," he's just said, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's all these people looking out there." He won't distinguish between going to the moon. That's astronomy. Well, it's basically, you know, I generally say that I think often it's kind of like space is two parts. It's the platform for looking at the Earth and communications and weather satellites and military satellites and remote sensing. And brackets, I think politicians, or at least my politicians, think that's the useful bit, right? And then there's all the rest of us who are talking about frontiers knowledge and expanding and exploring, which are the looking out people. And I think that's about as far as my MP in his constituency would understand space. He wouldn't understand it at any other level than that.
And indeed, we are sending science payloads to the moon.
Exactly.
So by 2026, we would like to see at least 6 payloads on the ground.
Yeah. So as I say, there is ideas now of putting together a consortium to look at research infrastructure for European lunar studies. And the question is, well, who's going to be involved in that? I would suggest that the telescope people should indeed be involved in that. And if it's an idea of doing that, well, yeah, make sure you don't leave the. I mean, meteorologists will have a great time, but I think some of our planetary scientists and others should be there as well.
Yes, and as Artemis is ongoing, and ESA is trying to be official partner on Artemis, so we are developing Argonaut, so a cargo lander which can bring down 1.5 tons of useful mass to the surface. So in the first Artemis missions, we will have. We have to serve the needs of NASA, so we have to bring down whatever they would like us to bring to the surface. But in later missions, we can secure a certain mass, probably, to put our payload on it, and then the astronauts can then deploy on the surface, and then we can also do science and technology development, because when we want to perform a certain science activity, then we need the instruments for that, and we need to keep developing those instruments. So this is certainly coming.
Okay.
And then when that comes, it comes in announcement of opportunities. So that will be announced on at ESA website, and we have also a platform where ideas can be always submitted. It's called the OSIT platform. So calls will be coming.
Yeah. Can we turn to I'll call them broadly our nuclear colleagues, AHEAD, APPEC, ChETEC, because you have a lot of work in this area. It's absolutely essential to understand what we're doing. I just wonder what your thoughts and concepts are about moving forward and collaborations and so on. Lorenzo happens to be in the room. Daniel, I think, is still online. I don't know if but I know you're here. But Daniel is online as well. So maybe, Lorenzo, we could start with you. And then maybe Daniel online can comment.
Thank you. In this cycle ahead, as I said before, we have managed to integrate with another community, which is the gravitational wave and partly also astroparticle. And it was a really successful effort. In the sense that even if the problems that came out, we managed to solve with a big effort, joint effort, and we found a really beautiful collaboration. I think this is the start of a story. Maybe it can start here in this meeting. And I think we have two channels now here. I think we have to understand how do we merge and to face the EU, what they are doing, and trying to make them aware that of the problems that this approach is creating with our communities. Of course, we have the budget problem, because in this approach the budget is much less than before, and the communities are growing. And so this is something that we should take really into great attention, and how to get. I agree with this effort. At the end, I think creating this network is a good idea. And on the other side, we have this urgence of the next call for the Horizon Europe, because some of our communities are ending the activity. We are also thinking about how to continue even without some of the some of the things that we have realized that we're continuing after, but we are not sure yet how to do that. I think your example of creating an association and so on is possible way. But now for this course, I think the urgent maybe is to find some keywords, but few keywords, not very many, because the course are and trying to understand what one is doing in respect to the others are doing. So anyway, this is a very good.
I mean, we've had a lot of discussion here this week about TAs. We said last year, and we're not alone. I mean, in the meeting in Brno, this is something that the Commission should be proud of. It is unique. It gives us, I believe, a cutting edge, and they've endangered it because I can't see it. We've all had the discussions that it's very difficult to think that you're going to find another way of funding it because of the way that it's set up. It is a unique thing. But I think you and others mentioned that the other thing which they've reduced is the JRAs. And I know that particularly the telescope people as well, and I'm sure yourself too. That was a key part. That had a thing. I think there's no argument there to talk about that. Now I know there's a technology call coming out, and again I know that people are thinking about, well, there's a call for 15 million or whatever for technology. Maybe the space community could look at that, and there are kind of key areas on detectors, for example, that ChETEC were talking about last week, and obviously the development of next generation detectors for telescopes would make sense, but it won't be embedded in something else. This is the point. They've pulled them apart, and maybe that's not the best way of having the technology. I'm going to ask the others. I mean, Daniel, I don't know if you want to come in, and Zolt's in the room here, so maybe he can also speak up on behalf of the kind of the ChETEC and the nuclear astrophysics. But Daniel, if you're on, can you comment?
So unfortunately, Daniel had to leave at 3, since his apologies.
Oh, okay, sorry. Then Axel, maybe you can comment.
Yeah, we discussed briefly. So, I mean, we're just on the general idea with forming a network. I mean, we're obviously in favor of that. I mean, it seems a good idea to continue this sort of discussion and collaboration to identify the common interests, let's say. And yeah, especially what you now said about the TA. I mean, that's obviously one of the cornerstones, but also for our project, or let's say the possible follow-ups for our project, like the JRAs and the networking activities. This is something we're at the moment sorely missing and would be interested in finding ways to follow up on this. But yeah, in general, we're in favor of that.
Thank you. Zolt, would you like to? Yeah, you've got the microphone. Yep. And you've also got the Eli perspective as well, so you can.
Thank you. So it's, I think ChETEC is a nice example that actually 3 different topics and groups working together. So this, the nuclear physics guys, the supercomputer modelers, and also some of the observers. And the big idea was that because there were individual submissions for projects, but maybe Axel can reinforce that message that those projects who were actually different groups are working together and they solve a problem, let's say with the help of nuclear physics to understand an observation through modeling, that would be the key issue. So actually it is not just parallel things that 3 different groups are working, but they are working together. So that would be probably the key issue, that not just work together because this is the way to get more funds, but actually to use the synergies and working together. And it reminds me one of the previous talks when the large-scale facilities, actually they offer their complex service to, this radiate, ion beams, lasers, whatever, to solve whatever problem it is, okay? So they don't say, well, they say they can solve everything. So they're looking for the problem, and if somebody shows up with the problem, then they solve it. So I think they are moving from the fantastic infrastructure and offer for scientists to do whatever you want. Now, as I see here, and maybe I'm mistaken, we have the science case, a general science case, maybe a little bit diverse, but the science case, and actually people and the labs, they are working on together to solve a science case. So for me, it's more like a mission-oriented subject, but I don't see that type of mission on the European horizon. We see the climate, we see the cancer, we see others. So in that, it brings me back somewhat to ESA, because if ESA, let's say, suggest or stronger to the European Commission that for the ESA missions, the technical missions, the launches and whatever, the scientific part is important from the European Commission, and then in the end, let's say hypothetically it is accepted, then there should be a mission call in the European Commission, and then our group, this diverse group, actually can raise their hands that, okay, we are already there. We can solve this mission if there is, there is something to be solved, and maybe some of the ESA missions needed us to solve something. So in my view, that would be better, because otherwise I don't see we are very competitive on the large scale with other facilities that can solve everything. So we are more coming from the science side. That is my impression. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody want to comment on that? Gareth, you have experience not only in the space science area, but you also have experience on knowledge of other research infrastructures, laser, cultural heritage. I wonder if you'd have some comments about what we've been talking about today, because you've got a lot of experience. Put you on the spot.
Yeah, put me on the spot, and then particularly in terms of the cultural heritage, I don't think I should talk about that, because I think it's a shambles the way they're behaving at the moment. That particular setup isn't working because they're trying to bring scientists into social science, and their communication has not been a great success, and it has meant that the TNA system is hugely behind. So they've actually just managed to get a year extension on their current RI. So I don't think there's many things to learn from that apart from mistakes, in that we are all talking mainly scientist to scientist, and we are realizing that the outreach is something that we're not experts at, and we're bringing in the experts to help us do that. The thing that particularly the ERISE project has not been a big success, in that then the social scientists are managing it and they're not communicating well enough with the scientists, and vice versa. The laser lab is run much better and is very effective, and that part of that group, I'm from the Free University in Amsterdam, and some of the people there are on the management team, so we talk frequently, and we're always discussing the best ways to host TAs, make them more efficient, and problems with they're dealing often with samples, which often in the Europlanet side there are physical materials are being brought to and from places, and how to make that more efficient, in that somebody being in the lab and just crushing up a sample, it takes time, but clearly we can't be claiming 2,000 euros a day to use the laboratory, when in fact all that somebody's doing is maybe looking down the microscope or crushing things. So within the EU, I think them having a better understanding that every single TA visit is slightly different, and to give a little bit more flexibility to how we set charges is something that I would love them to do, but it's obviously very difficult to do because everything has to be audited, and how we can have different access costs for the same facilities is very difficult for the smaller instruments. With the larger telescopes and things, I think naively that maybe their things are much more coherent, and in that your costs better, but for the smaller ones, that's not the case. I'll shut up there for now and see if there's any feedback from that.
Well, we have two people who've got a lot of experience in doing this. Isabella, a good one. Maybe you've sat through all these infrastructures. You've interacted with many of them. You've managed them. Have you got some thoughts and guidelines about how we could work better together and some advice? We can have a microphone down here. Either of two of you or both of you.
And how the infrastructure works before we will apply this model for transnational access there, because it's sometimes very difficult, but you have some flexibility, and also what kind of transnational access is offered not only by the telescopes could be pretty easy, but is it not working?
Yes.
Okay, so as I said, it's good to understand how the infrastructure works, and then you can try to apply the system of the access, how you define what is the access and how you charge this. And sometimes you have to be very flexible. So what happened, for example, to us, we had the classical telescopes where you go and observe, but then at the end we have a telescope that you don't go really observe. What you do, you go to the expertise centers. They help you with the proposal, they help you then with the data reduction, but not with the observation itself. And the telescope itself belongs to ESA, which is kind of very difficult to get this as a transnational access. So we created really transnational access in the ORP to the expertise centers. And we had to find out how to charge this, and our unit is a project. So because we could really define how much work each project takes, because it always has the same procedures. So this is good to talk to each other when we have different astronomy and different facilities, how we really do, and how maybe we can take other examples into us. Maybe this our solution, maybe it's not the most effective, but when we will have this network, as you said, if this something like this, and then we talk and how it really works as a day-to-day management, then we can optimize this, I think, the best. So
any advice on how these different research infrastructures should talk to each other? The network of networks you seem to be in favor of, but maybe organizationally, is there any advice you would give?
Well, what we have, for example, because our system is that our infrastructures, they use their own normal access. So we don't have access to the project, to EU project, but we just take the normal access, and some of the projects that are eligible, we take in charge. So what we have organized, we have on each infrastructure transnational access leaders, and then we have a coordinator that meets every 3 months, every 4 months. We meet with them and see how they're progressing, what is going, what is not going, and looking for solution. So then we have, in principle, one contact person that knows how it works. So and the forum of the other ones. So if they meet, so we could start first probably from each infrastructure, not the infrastructure, but the projects that we have, to have this person that have experience, and they create like a forum.
Okay. Good one, please. And then I'll ask, I think we'll get comments from the astrobiology team, and then Jonas, maybe just from the ESF helicopter view, a little bit of space, just how we might work together, and then it's coffee. Good one, please.
Just wanted to compliment on some of the points that have been made, and then bring the conversation back to some sort of more broader points. I think what comes out of this is that a lot of people have to be kept happy. So we're just talking about auditors in terms of the infrastructures. We have to keep auditors happy. We have to keep infrastructure managers happy. We have to keep users happy. So that sort of brings me back to some of the earlier conversation that we've had. It seems to me there's a lot of information out there that needs to be taken into account. There are a lot of stakeholders, there are a lot of people who all might have different ambitions. And I think, to me, the way of starting this is to try and work out what the information is, how it's being used, in which direction it's being pulled, and what different people want to do, and how one can accommodate this in a way of keeping at least the majority of people happy. including politicians or, you know, as we want, the European Commission. Because I think the part of the issue that we have with the European Commission at the moment, and what I've understood that everybody agrees that they seem to be slightly shooting in the dark, is that, I mean, the question I would like to ask is, where's the information coming from that you're currently holding on the basis of which you're issuing these calls? That doesn't seem to be a clear answer to that, and it would be actually to everybody's interest to find that out.
Indeed. Okay. As I say, we have got COVID, but maybe Wolf, I've asked the people sort of more on the nuclear side, and we've had the astronomy and the planetary side, but maybe the astrobiology is the newer field. Obviously, it has different interests, so maybe your comments about working together and any comments that you have on the session.
Yeah, I think the network of network has to encompass quite a lot of different institutions and different entities on a different level. So we've got 3 levels more or less. That's what I call the political level. Would be ESA, would then be also national research and the national space agencies, if they exist, because also in the Nordic countries, I mean, this management of space project is done in very different ways. Sweden has a space agency, other Nordic countries do it different. Then there is the level of the institutions and also the research facilities, and then of course there is the level or the Korea, if you can call it like that, of individual membership organizations that can be everything from scientists, associations, scientists, organizations, but also grassroots organizations of citizen scientists, of young researchers, and everything. And these would be also all have to be kept under a hat. And also, I think one thing, I think there are 2 things that such network and of networks could achieve. First of all, is of course to serve as a fostering organization, as a greenhouse for getting new proposals, getting new funding, but also more important, the exchange of good practices. Because if somebody wants to, for example, establish a new research infrastructure, I mean, then it would be good that you have not really to invent the wheel for another time, but you can actually get some advice from other people and avoid mistakes that have been made. So, for example, if somebody wants to, let's say, have an European Institute for Astrochemistry or something similar, then we would say, okay, we could actually give you some examples, what worked with us, what did not work. You can avoid the mistakes we made, and you can actually push the things that really we found to be successful. I think this exchange of good practices and proposal writing, and also avoiding double work, double things would be a good achievements of this network.
Yeah. I mean, certainly Europlanet will always thank our colleagues in RadioNet particularly. It doesn't seem however many years ago when we first met, when we set it up, but we certainly could get onto a faster start because we learned from you, and then we've taught others. Anita, and then maybe just Jonas to finish. Anita.
So I'm sorry to be a bit of put a damper on this, but we're 5 minutes over time. We've got 10 minutes till we're supposed to be
going for the observatory
to get a bus. So,
okay. Last comment from maybe Jonas, just for the helicopter view. Maybe just comment as you. ESF has space strategy hats on as well, and then those who aren't going on the telescope, we can just sit and talk downstairs in the bar area if anybody wants to continue the conversation.
Yeah, maybe a comment just in line with what Wolf just mentioned about not reinventing the wheel. There are many societies that are established on top of the ERIs, and many institutions that exist in Europe, and we have some at ESF. So like CRAFT for radio astronomy already exists and needs to be involved. NUPEC for nuclear physics is also managed by ESF, and also we have like the European Space Science Committee that is also hosted by ESF and actually talks on a yearly basis with the ESA directors of science and HRE and even Earth observation and other parts like DTEC. And I think in the interest of not reinventing the wheel, trying to bring all of these people together and trying to see what works with what is already there, rather than inventing maybe another structure on top, that maybe something to consider.
Okay, right. Taking Anita's comments, coffee is there. If you are going to the observatory, can you be down in the foyer about 2:45, 10:45 to get on the bus to go to there? Hope many of you will join us for dinner tonight. Details of where it is have been circulated. It's not far away. It's quite easy to find. You just type it into the map. We will follow up. I've kind of got a feeling that we will find some way of making sure that we continue this grouping together, and we'll cluster in some way, or network of networks in some way. And we'll continue the conversation and think about how we can talk together, how we can set up a platform so that we can do that. If there are people who you feel are the networks that are missing, of course, we're open. So if there's somebody we've missed, let us know. And maybe some of us may well be at the EAS meeting in Krakow in a few time, but we will find some other forum. And then obviously next year's calls and so on can be open for discussion. But thank you for coming. I wanted this to be a kind of starting point, and thank you for all your input. And it was just good to get everybody under the same roof, because I think that's been very useful. Coffee, observatory, or sit downstairs and chat if you want. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you for all the people online.